Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto was in Overlord. What if Naruto lived in 22nd century Japan? What if he was the guildmaster of Ain's Old Gown? What if another guild with an axe to grind also appeared around the same time? Before we start, kindly like and subscribe to this channel and look over the description box for the author of this amazing storyline. Welcome aboard! Chapter 7, Downfall of Castle and Country Part 1. Cries of pain and a feminine cackle filled the air, followed by the shattering of bone and creak of sundered metal. A man, well over 6 feet tall and fully armored, flew on by, launched into the air like a child's plaything. In a way, that's precisely what he was. Now brandishing a black tetsubo with bone-white spikes and a ring pommel, Fumiko was having the time of her life, giggling in malicious, childish glee as she watched the poor fucker bounce and roll with many a crunch and clatter. The two remaining men-at-arms facing her and Sheltir took a collective step back. What monstrous strength, the left one muttered, instinctively lifting his shield higher. Fumiko grinned, hoisting her club onto one shoulder, as she leered at the men. So, who's next? It went without saying that the pink-haired Kijo was enjoying her new assignment a bit more than she should have. The mission in question was simple: capture any strong belligerents from the slain theocracy and kill the rest. They had yet to achieve the former. The two men looked at one another. With a roar, they charged her from the sides. The trail of dead bodies made it abundantly clear that there was no escape from these women, so moving forward and striking was the only thing they could do. Fumiko's grin widened as she waited for them to come closer. Nothing excited her quite as much as battle did, aside from breaking people in said fight. Then, without warning, she struck, sending them both flying one swing of her tetsubo. "I don't see how you're enjoying this so much," Sheltir commented. "It's like swatting flies." Fumiko looked at the vampiric loli oddly. "I don't see how you're not." The looks of shock on their faces, the sound of their bones cracking, "It's thrilling as all hell to me." She then shrugged, "Not like any of them can offer me a challenge anyway, so I might as well just play with them." Sheltir hummed thoughtfully. "You have a point there." Then, she smiled. "Those screams are quite pleasant, too." Fumiko gave her another odd look. "You make it sound like you want them to suffer." "One must extract pleasure from their work somehow," the vampire told her. "Keeps it interesting." "Suit yourself, I guess." "I don't care if they suffer or not. They took up arms on their own and are threatening that village papa went so far out of his way to protect. As long as I win and hear their bones crack, I'm happy." 1. "You're such an odd, little Kijo, I must admit. Weren't her kind supposed to revel in human suffering? They were the literal antithesis of humanity, right?" "I get that a lot." Fumiko shrugged helplessly. "That's just how she was." Sheltir hummed again, "I'm certain Lord Kurama created you that way for a reason." The Kijo smiled. "I'm sure Papa did, though I couldn't tell you what it is for the life of me. The supreme beings are wise beyond us. We shouldn't question their vision." The Oni shook her head. "Papa doesn't care about that nonsense. I just never asked." "Nonsense?" Sheltir's voice gained an edge. To her, such a response felt blasphemous. Fumiko nodded, not noticing or more likely not caring about the small vampire's reaction. "Yeah. Nonsense. Papa's not like that at all. He takes time to talk to me and my sister. He gives us gifts. He can't cook to save his life. He laughs at stupid jokes and he makes a fool of himself sometimes too, just like a normal dad. I'm sure he feels weird being treated like a god, to be honest." Sheltir was more than a little surprised to hear that. "Even still, he and the others are our creators. It's only natural that we'd revere them as such. And he's the only one who did not leave." "You mean abandon us?" "That feels too harsh," Sheltir commented hesitantly, averting her gaze. I'm sure they had their reasons. Fumiko shrugged again. Maybe, maybe not. Never asked. I just know Papa's the only one who stayed and kept everything running. Which is why I and many others, I'm sure, fell for him. He didn't get bored with us. Fumiko frowned at that, realizing that their conversation had opened a wound in the lowly. So? She began awkwardly, rubbing her arm while looking away. What was Lord Perorancino like? Turning around, she noticed the surprised look on Sheltier's face. She only shrugged in response. None of the others ever just came to the 8th floor to visit, so I never got to know them while they were around. Maybe getting the vampire to talk about her creator would help Sheltier vent. Hopefully, she didn't just make it worse. I see. Said Lowly frowned at that. The poor thing. No wonder she acted so casually about the other Supreme Ones, she simply never had the chance to see them and how glorious they truly were. He was a charming man, always open about his interests. He also had such a crude sense of humor. Sheltier giggled, looking rather amused. It was quite the guilty pleasure, I'll admit. And what were these interests? Fumiko questioned, not at all knowing that she'd just opened Pandora's box. Well, I'm sure even you've heard about the sex dungeon by now. Sheltier giggled again, an uncharacteristically lewd grin upon her face. He would often come bring me these lovely outfits, too. What kind of food is this? A shrill, nigh hysterical shout and clatter of silverware drew quite a bit of attention within the dining hall. The one responsible was a woman of immaculate beauty who flicked one of her 4 French curls in annoyance. Every move she made was the epitome of elegance and grace. Even the woman's anger only seemed to add to her charm. Clearly, she was a noblewoman of some sort. She simply had to be. Her table, meanwhile, was back to the brim with all manner of dishes, loaves of bread, still steaming in their basket, thick cuts of rare, juicy meat, buttered and mashed potatoes, sweet corn, and a salad of the freshest vegetables, drizzled in a fragrant, citrus vinaigrette. Each one was among the finest dishes of this in the shining golden pavilion, one of the most high-end establishments in all of Irantal. Miraculously, the building had been left completely untouched by yesterday's incident, even the staff was completely unscathed, so in the wake of that, it was not but business as usual. For the most part. Alas, despite the best efforts of their chefs, despite nothing but the finest ingredients having been used and their freshness ensured by the casting of preservation magic, the young woman turned her nose up at it all. It tastes horrible, she huffed, much to the shock of nearly everyone present, leaving them all speechless. The aged butler standing behind her was the only one who seemed completely unaffected, his stoic visage unmoving even when she turned to glare at him. I cannot bear to remain in this rundown city any longer, the blonde said. We are leaving, now. Young mistress, the butler replied. It's already eve. Silence. Her tone left no room for argument as she interrupted him. I don't care if it's the middle of the night, we are leaving. Understood, young mistress. I shall make preparations for our departure immediately. The woman huffed again. If you understand, then hurry up and get ready, Seabass. And with that, she tossed the fork, stood up, and stomped out of the dining hall. Once that little storm had passed, Sebastien, head butler of Nazarick, bowed respectfully as he addressed the staff and other patrons. I apologize to everyone for the disturbance, he said, before picking up the chair his companion had knocked over. Once that was done, he turned to a man waiting in the wings. Innkeeper, he called out. Yes? The man in question quickly approached. Once again, I apologize if anyone was startled by that display, Seabass told him. Though it does not excuse what has happened, please, allow me to pay for everyone's meal. The innkeeper was more than delighted by his proposal, to say the least. Seabass' eyes then fell upon a destitute-looking man shoveling food into his mouth like a damn pig. When he felt the butler's gaze, however, said man straightened up immediately and scampered on over. Master Seabass? Though his attire was no less fanciful and high quality than that of any patron here, it did not suit him at all. In fact, Seabass found the man's outfit to be almost comically inappropriate, as if he were looking upon a clown in a fancy dress. Seeing how the man looked like he had something to say, Seabass prompted him to spit it out. "What is it, Zack?" "As a hired man, I am in no position to offer an alternative, but would it be possible to reconsider leaving immediately?" The other guests frowned at the man. His oily tone and the way he wrung his hands all but confirmed that he was a seedy little shit. Seabass, however, remained as stoic as ever. "Given the young mistress' personality, I dare say that would be impossible. Is there an issue I am not aware of?" I have some business to attend to is all." "Of course, we will not be departing right away," Seabass told him. "It will take some time to load all of the young mistress' luggage into the wagon. In the meantime, please do prepare for our departure." Seabass took note the wily gleam in Zack's eye, but said nothing. Many a frown in the dining hall deepened as several patrons therein smelled the rat. "How soon shall we be leaving then?" "In no more than 3 hours," Seabass told him. Once more, he saw a calculative look in Zack's eyes, but made no indication of it. "That'll be fine," Zack said, barely containing the cackle that threatened to surface. "Excellent. Be on your way, then." When the slimy little shit scampered off, Seabass waved a hand in front of himself as if to dispel some manner of pollution that man had left behind. The butler bit back his urge to sigh. He had no love for such despicable people. Perhaps Albedo or Demiurge could find some amusement in that man, using him as a plaything or what have you, but Seabass most certainly couldn't. Still, all was going according to plan, and that was what mattered in the end. But even then... "Good grief," he lamented. "Humans are supposed to be an outstanding species." As Zack ran down the steps in a frantic hurry, he couldn't help but reflect on how pitiful his life had been up until now. Born to a farmer's family in the kingdom, where more than half of their harvest was given to the local lord, it was a harsh one to say the least. They would barely scrape by, even when said lord didn't just randomly leave them with only 20% of their harvest. Then, his beloved sister suddenly disappeared, his parents running off to look for her and leaving him to tend to the farm alone. He knew from the start that she'd been sold off. Before the Golden Princess outlawed slavery, it was far too widespread for that not to be the case, and they had been struggling. Even to this day, when he went to the brothel for a quick lay, he simply couldn't help but see if she was there, if only to find out what happened to her. Zack doubted he'd ever find her, and even if he did, he knew it would be impossible to save her. But as her big brother, it felt like his duty to at least try. And then, he was conscripted. Once a year the kingdom would mobilize against the empire in more of a glorified annual skirmish than a legitimate war, one that no one but the nobility enjoyed, as it was a quick and easy way for the bastards to prove that they were willing to put their lives on the line for the peasantry, but anyone with a brain could see right through that bullshit. The only merit it held was that it meant less mouths to feed when it was done, allowing some of the struggling families to eat their fill. To make matters worse, only the lucky were actually rewarded for their services, for putting their lives on the line for king and country. Sometimes, the troops received nothing for being good little sheep, no matter what they did. Zack had been conscripted thrice, the second one only being more disillusioning than the first. But when that third time came, his life turned around. He looked down at the weapon in his hand and asked himself why he should return to that farm at all. So, he ran off with that weapon, not giving a damn what would become of his parents because of it. He had no love for them after they sold his sister. And as luck would have it, he managed to stumble upon a band of Sellswords who aided him in fleeing. Speaking of, Zack quickly found himself in the slums of Irantal, one of the few places those skeletal dragons hadn't touched, and slunk into an alleyway. He looked several times to ensure that no one was following him, knocked 3 times, waited, and knocked 4 more. It was a signal, and he received an immediate response. A small, hidden shutter covering the peephole in the door opened up and Zack saw a man's eyes look through. "Oh, it's you," a voice said, before opening the door. "Come in." Later, Seabass knocked on the door to the room he and the blonde were staying in before entering. When he did, he saw a very apologetic blonde greeting him with a bow. Beside her, bowing as well, was another woman with black hair done up in a ponytail. "Please forgive my unsightly behavior," the blonde said. "You have no reason to apologize," he assured. "You were just playing your part, after all." Indeed, she was. The woman in question was Solution Epsilon, one of the Pleiades Battlemaids, a master assassins, only slightly weaker than her big sister, Lupus Regina Beta. The other woman, meanwhile, was Narberyl Gamma, a battlemage, also of the Pleiades Battlemaids, and one of the strongest members of the Six-Star Formation. Her bell-shaped battle armor was swapped out for the more traditional uniform worn by the Homunculus Maids, but this one was equipped with a quick-change gem in case shit were to hit the fan. 2. Seabass looked around the luxurious suite, not at all surprised that it was unimpressive. Then again, he was in charge of Nazaric's 9th floor, so it went without saying that he was not easy to impress. He also saw that the luggage was already packed up and tucked away for when they leave. "I'll tidy up the rest," he said. "Yes, sir, I couldn't possibly let you do that." I must also protest," Narberyl spoke up, looking just as aghast at the very thought. Seabass shook his head, giving Solution a small, mischievous grin. "You're to play the part of a rich, spoiled lady." "I am your butler, am I not?" The blonde returned the smile, though hers was far more uncomfortable. "Even so, I'm your subordinate, it feels awkward." "Consider it in order, then," Seabass said, clasping his hands behind his back. "Rest here until we set out." He turned his attention to Narberyl. "You, meanwhile, are to assist me." "Of course," Narberyl replied. She still looked uncomfortable at the thought of letting Seabass do so much work, but orders were orders. Very well, Solution relented. "So, am I to assume that everything is going according to plan?" "You are. That performance of yours should attract more than enough attention, so it would be a shock if we didn't encounter bandits along the way." "Oh, we will," the blonde assured. "That Zack fellow just got done arranging it." Then her expression twisted and contorted into a maniacal grin that was simply not possible for the human face to form. "I want to eat him when we do." Seabass couldn't help but wonder what she'd heard that man say while listening in on that conversation. "All in good time, Solution. He has a purpose to serve, first." "Of course, sir." She bowed to him again. A single stagecoach galloped away from the fortress city in the dead of night, heading west towards the kingdom's royal capital. The full moon bathed the land, illuminating it surprisingly well, but did nothing to reveal something nefarious hiding in the shadows. Seabass and the others, keeping up their guises of a highborn lady and her two servants, were seated inside said stagecoach, enjoying the comfortable silence. None spoke to one another, for they had nothing more to speak about until their trap was sprung. Suddenly, the carriage stopped. Solution and Narberyl exchanged looks with the butler. The maid's eyes conveyed a simple question, and Saba's single nod was an equally simple answer. They waited a couple moments more before somebody started banging on the carriage door. "Hey! Time to get out, you three." The first to follow the stranger's orders was Seabass, stepping out of the carriage, followed by Narberyl. When the latter exited the stagecoach, many a bandit unabashedly salivated at her beauty. If this looker was just a maid, they looked forward to seeing the mistress. Seabass eyeballed the bandits for a moment before addressing Solution as she was still inside, behaving with all the haughtiness her role would entail. "My lady," he said, offering a hand to her, "you have visitors." Several of the men behind him laughed, others leered perversely when Solution stepped outside. She sneered at them like a true highborn lady who had never needed to lift a finger in her life before glancing at Seabass. "Is this all of them, Seabass?" The butler looked around one more time before nodding his head. "It would appear so, my lady." "That's good to hear," Solution said with a smile. "It's been too long since I got to sate my hunger." Many a man in the area shuddered delightedly as she punctuated that sentence by untying her bodice. She then peeled it off and let her ample bosom spring free from its cloth confines. Then, her dress slipped down as she presented herself to them, inviting them to have their way with her. It was too good to be true. Indeed, it was, but they didn't know that yet. So, solution cooed. Who wants to go first? One particularly brazen soul came forth, dropping his spear and copping a feel before anyone could react, and that would be the last thing he ever did. What? His hands sank right into her, as though she was made of water, but no matter how hard he tried to pull out, her iron grip kept him in place. What the hell are you? I'm a predator slime, of course. Solution giggled. She took note of the thunder of murmurs that followed and grinned evilly. Oh, I see. My kind doesn't exist in this world. How lovely. Then, the man inside her chest screamed in agony and panic, feeling as though 1,000 needles were impaling his hands at once, before being pulled in deeper, and deeper, and deeper. Bloop. And in an instant, he was gone, devoured by her seemingly liquid form and digested just as quickly. Delicious. Solution cooed, licking her chops. So, who's next? And so, Seabass' little side quest of collecting some bandits to interrogate went on without a hitch, save for maybe Solution's appetite being much bigger than expected. In the end, it took no less than 5, Zack included, to satisfy her, but that still left plenty for Lord Kurama. Of course, this was not actually part of their mission. Naruto just wanted them to head to the city of Rieste Eyes and gather intel. But, when a certain Yuko muttered to himself about looking for bandits while he and Lupus Regina were out and about, Seabass got the hint and quickly got to work setting up this arrangement with Solution's help. 3. While Solution enjoyed her new playthings and Sheltir was giving his poor baby girl a sizable collection of mental scars, a troubled Naruto sat in his true form upon the bed of their room in the inn, a haunted look upon his face. After meeting his inner demon, he had come to terms with never going back to feeling like a normal human. But, still, to think he was capable of doing what he had without remorse. Is everything all right, me lord? Lupus Regina asked, a concerned pout upon her face. Ha! The pout slowly slid off her face, turning into a deep, troubled frown. You look like something's eating at you. Naruto sighed. When I found those necromancers in that hideout, there was a girl guarding them, he said. The werewolf tilted her head at that. I didn't see anything there when I looked. Hell, I didn't even smell any woman there, save for, well, you? Naruto laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. Yes, that would be thanks to a spell I used. Destroy evidence. Nothing remained after it was done living up to the name. Oh? Lupus Regina looked at him oddly. Why did you do that? It would have raised some awkward questions, Naruto replied. Then, he let out a sigh. I let loose on her, and she died. Of course, he pointedly avoided specifying how she died, but his companion got the hint, it wasn't pretty. Not in the fucking slightest. Lupus Regina tilted her head again, looking at him oddly. Naruto didn't know how to feel about her both seemingly understanding and not caring about the implication. Then, the red-haired maid spoke up after a moment of thought. She was a human, right? Yes. Then, what's the problem? She was so confused. Why was this bothering him? Humans are nothing more than food and playthings to our kind. Except for little sis, of course. It was so easy to forget that Oriole was human. But, then again, she was above and beyond her paltry race, an immortal who had been created by the Supreme Ones, which was why Lupus Regina found it so easy to forget that she still was a human at the end of the day. Oblivious to her thoughts, Naruto shook his head with a humorless chuckle. This might come as a surprise, he began. But, well, I was human once. Guess a part of me is still kinda shocked by the fact that I didn't feel anything but relief. That did come as a surprise to say the least. Oh, wow. I never would have guessed. To think one of the Supreme Ones used to be something so tiny and insignificant, only to become something so glorious. It made her realize just how badass he really was. Naruto sighed, her look of adoration left unnoticed. I never would have done something like that back then, he continued. It should sicken me. I should be hating myself for it, I should feel remorse for her, I should be afraid of what I'm capable of doing without a second thought. But it didn't bother me. Not at all. I loved it, in fact. Her breath hitched at his haunted expression. Lupus Regina hesitated, but her lord clearly needed to talk about it. Do you regret it? Naruto grabbed his hair and pulled at it in frustration. I don't, and that's the fucking problem. Lupus Regina frowned and took a seat right next to him. Forgive me, Lord, she began hesitantly, but I don't see how it is. What you were is, well, just that. It's what you were. Please, don't let it bother you, it's not healthy. How can I? Look at it this way, it's not about what you were, but what you are, and who you are, she said, smiling. You're something more, now. Something greater. You are one of the supreme beings of Nazarick, now, and the only one who stayed behind while the others got bored with us and left. Despite her oddly soothing, matter-of-fact tone, Naruto could sense the bitterness she felt. They didn't leave because they got bored, he told her, letting out a sigh. Lupus Regina flinched at that, immediately assuming that she'd offended him. My apologies, It's fine, the Yuko assured. I can't blame you for coming to that conclusion, thanks for the pep talk, though. I needed that. He'd still need more time to come to terms with all of this, but still, that helped. Feeling emboldened, the werewolf nodded and smiled at him warmly. Any time, Lord. The next day, in what was left of the guild hall after one of the skeletal dragons fell on top of it, Naruto and Lupus Regina, back in their alter egos, stood before the guildmaster as Pluton spoke. Let me be the first to congratulate you, he said. Not only did you save this city, but you did so alone where many others would have perished. The man in question was no longer in his old, barely still-fitting battle armor. Now, he was garbed in simple tunic, shirt and trousers. His hair was combed back and he looked pretty well kempt despite his workload in the wake of that half-assed zombie apocalypse. His 5 o'clock shadow was the only sign of anything amiss. Naruto rubbed the back of his head and smiled sheepishly. It wasn't that hard. Yes, quite, the man said, giving the girl before him an unreadable look. I suppose that new moniker will suit you, then. Naruto blinked stupidly, not knowing what he was on about. Moniker. The guildmaster nodded. They're calling you Kushina the Untouchable, now. Quite fitting, given their claims of how you so effortlessly danced and hopped around those undead hordes. 4. Naruto turned beet red at that, legitimately embarrassed, but somewhat proud of himself. It wasn't that impressive, he insisted. I'm sure your colleagues would beg to differ, Pluton told him with a boisterous laugh. It's nice to see that you're not letting your skills get to your head though despite your age, no less. You have no idea how refreshing that is. Kushina has always been pretty wise for her age, Lupus Regina chimed in. And a little too humble for her own good. A true prodigy, then? And no. Not at all. Naruto waved his hands in front of him. I'm just, really good at fighting. The guildmaster laughed again. Ah, to be so young and innocent again. Pushing those thoughts aside, Pluton then addressed the blonde before him. Well, then, he said, let's put you in a position where you can make proper use of that skill, shall we? Naruto lowered his hands and looked at him oddly. What do you mean? I'm going to grant you the rank of Goldplate, of course. Hell, he was tempted to bump Kushina up to Mithril. And he would have too, had he seen the spectacle for himself, but this seemed a bit more reasonable, given her lack of experience. For a moment, Naruto just stared. The guildmaster took his reaction as a sign he was shocked, which he was, but not as badly as it looked. He was just surprised that his career would progress this quickly. He hadn't even planned on rising through the ranks at this point. His goal was to find out more about the world more than anything. But, then again, this promotion would actually put him into a better position to do precisely that, since it meant that he could take on more dangerous missions and actually meet the higher-ranking adventurers. He felt a weight settle on his shoulder and turned to see Lupus Regina smiling at him. "Isn't that great, Kushina?" Yes, it is," he muttered hesitantly, making a show of acting overwhelmed. He was, in truth, the exact opposite, though. To be placed in the top ranks of the normie adventurers that quickly, it showed just how weak the humans in this world really were. As for Regina, Pluton added, she will be granted the rank of silverplate. Her feats weren't quite as impressive as yours, but she was instrumental in keeping everyone alive. "You're too kind," Lupus Regina said, making a show of looking sheepish. Not much later, the two of them were sitting in the Guildhall's lounge, their new plates on full display, as they met back up with the Swords of Darkness. "Unfortunately." "Oh, my dear, sweetest Kushina. Not only are you the fairest maiden in the guild, but you've even ascended beyond me like a rising star." That included Luckrut. Naruto sighed, looking up at the annoying ranger in disdain. "You won't take the hint, will you?" he growled, tempted to end this whole charade and choke a bitch. "I'll spell it out for you, Luckrut. I am not interested." What would happen if he used destroy evidence on a living being? Questions for another time. He wasn't so tempted to test it on a colleague. Your cruel words cut deep, but I know you mean them not, truly. Truly. Just wait a bit, my dear, and you'll see that true love conquers all. Like right now. Fortunately, Ninya intervened, whacking the love-struck ranger upside the head before he could get himself killed by a third-tier caster who was established to be on the rag. "Behave, you," she muttered. "Thanks for the help," Naruto grumbled, eliciting a round of laughs from everyone around the table. He meant it, truly, he was just a little grumpy is all. "So, what are you going to do now?" Peter asked after everyone's chuckling died down. Naruto turned to look at him quizzically. "What do you mean, Peter?" "It's just that, we were supposed to show you the ropes and keep you safe until you got the hang of this whole adventuring thing. Seems like a moot point now that you're a gold plate, though." Naruto tapped his chin with a lone finger, making a big show of thinking about it as he looked up cutely. It was super effective. 5. "I was thinking of going back to Karn Village for a bit," he said, before biting his lip, "but after that, I don't see why we couldn't go on more quests together. I may be a gold plate, but I'm still a rookie. I do feel like I need a break after saving a damn city almost single-handedly, though." Truth be told, it was just an excuse to up and vanish for a bit so he and Henry could learn how to read. If he went missing all of a sudden without explanation, that might raise some awkward questions. "Sounds like a plan," Peter said with an enthusiastic grin. "Give us a holler when you get back, eh?" "I will," Naruto assured. Then, he groaned, faking a bit of stomach pain. "Is everything all right?" Dine asked. "Just a cramp is all." He was supposed to be having lady issues, so it would be a bit suspicious if he didn't act the part. His cheeks burned red at the thought, but he rolled with it. "Oh, fair maiden. Tell me how I can help you ouch." "Seriously, Luckrut," Ninya muttered, yanking hard on his ear and drawing more pained yelps from the ranger. "It's like you're trying to get yourself killed." Meanwhile, deep in the heart of the slain theocracy, a young man entered the grand hall of the Six Cardinals. He was a warrior of the priesthood, garbed in an ornate plate and wielding an equally decorated spear. He looked rather androgynous with long, black, wavy locks of hair spilling down past his shoulders and sharp red eyes. This man was Zulfaz Azrael, captain of the Black Scripture, and awaiting him in the chamber were 3 people. 6. He recognized them immediately. The first was an elderly woman wearing a gold and white, magic dress, Lady Care, wielder of the holy treasure known as Downfall of Castle and Country. The second was a much younger woman, a bespectacled, red-eyed blonde in otherworldly attire. Garbed in a pleated skirt, thigh-high stockings, a maroon blazer, simple shoes, and a black hairbow, this woman was unmistakably the Thousand Leagues astrologer, seventh seat of the Black Scripture, Roberta Thalissra Elisande. They tended to call her Bobby. 7. Zulfaz greeted her with a polite smile and then turned his attention to the only other man in the room. The man was a tall and imposing one with a commanding presence, standing head well above Zulfaz with broad shoulders and a neatly trimmed full beard. His hair was a salted gray in hue, his eyes were black as coal, and his garb made it clear that he was one of the 6 cardinals. His blue mitre was decorated with gold, sporting a line of rubies in the center, his brown and gold mantle denoting his status as the Cardinal of Earth to be more specific. Despite seeming at least a decade younger, he was in his mid-40s, though not just his appearance made that hard to believe as he was in good health for his age. If so desired, he could still whoop the asses of many of Zulfaz's peers. This was Raymond Zard Loranson, commander of the 6 scriptures, or rather, the remaining 5. He was also a former member of the Black Scripture himself, having held the 3rd seat in his prime. "I'm glad you could join us on such short notice, Captain Azrael," the man greeted. "Your Eminence," Zulfaz replied, bowing his head. "I came as soon as I was made aware of my summons. The Black Scripture is at your service." "As they always have been," he said, a polite smile gracing his face. Then his expression turned dead serious. "That said, I shall cut to the chase. Ever since the Sunlight Scripture failed to remove that obstacle to our vision, Gazef Stronov, many of our expeditionary forces have grown silent." He then gestured to the bespectacled blonde. "Ms. Elisande has expressed her opinion that something or someone is hunting them." He frowned, his tone growing dire. "Such an affront to our cause cannot be tolerated. I believe this is the doing of the heathen sorcerer, Ainzul Gol," Bobby chimed in. "I cannot tell what is killing them, but there's 10 of them, 2 of considerable might." "Have you heard of this man, Captain?" Raymond asked. "Only in passing, Your Eminence," Zulfaz replied. "If I am not mistaken, he is the one responsible for wiping out the Sunlight Scripture. Their spy in the royal capital had told them as much, soon after Gazef Stronov had returned and issued his report. He is, the Cardinal confirmed. That said, the Black Scripture is to slay these 10 demons and escort Lady Care to Karn village, near the great forest of Tab. We believe this heathen has made his lair somewhere in the area. You shall bring justice upon this interloper, for he stands in the way of humanity's destiny manifest." "Of course. Lady Care is to use her treasure only as a last resort," Raymond told him. "If you manage to defeat these demons without her help, proceed to Karn village. If not, bring the one she ensnares back alive so that we can study it." 8. Later on, now back in Nazarik's amphitheater, Naruto was eyeballing one of their new prisoners. The poor bastard had seen better days and his arms held in place by Cocytus in preparation for this little experiment. Naruto made a mental note to reward Seabass and the others for going above and beyond the call of duty like that. But such things would have to wait. "Right," he said, "time to figure out what's going on with my physical attack stat." One could practically see the question marks floating above the bandit's head at that. Pulling Wrath of Jigaku from his belt, Naruto handed it over to Aura. He staggered a bit, suddenly feeling rather weak. He shook it off, though, before reaching into his inventory and pulling out the staff he used while in the guise of Kushina. Raising the impromptu beating stick up high, he brought it down upon the bandit's head. Whack! As should be the case for a character with literally 0 physical attack, the strike did absolutely nothing. Raising the staff once more, Naruto tried again, and again, and again. Whack! 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 Strike after strike came down upon the man, not one of them doing any visible damage, if any at all, and when Naruto kicked him in the gonads for good measure, the bandit didn't even flinch. Of course, the bandit found it far more amusing than he should have, laughing at and berating Naruto for hitting like a toddler. The Yuko ignored it, gesturing for Cocytus to do the same when the insectoid somehow looked about ready to tear his prisoner in half. Naruto didn't quite know how he could tell. The guardian's body language gave no such indication and he was literally incapable of conveying emotion like a human with that face, but somehow, Naruto could still read him like a book. Shrugging it off, he retrieved Wrath of Jigaku from an irate aura and slipped the sword into his inventory, a black tear in spacetime opening up as he did so. Seemingly as a result, Naruto suddenly reinvigorated when he did so. It was so weird. Humming thoughtfully, Naruto couldn't help but wonder if that was a side effect of the sword's ability. Well, there was only one way to find out, and with that thought in mind, the Yuko raised his staff once more and... splat! What followed was an explosion of gore and bandit as Naruto's suspicions were confirmed in their entirety. Staring at the gelid bugman who was now painted red and holding a pair of disembodied arms, Naruto retrieved his sword and cast all appraisal magic item upon it. Several images flashed through his mind, revealing the stats, abilities, price, and so on. Then, Naruto perked up as something in the flavor text caught his attention. So powerful is the magic upon this sword that it only needs to be on one's person for the enchantments to affect them. On their person. Naruto mused aloud. So, in other words, it only needs to be in my inventory, now? As that realization came to mind, he cackled. That is so broken. I love it. Broken, my lord? Aura asked, looking confused. He said that like it's a good thing. Right. The Yuko muttered, deciding to clear things up. I meant broken as in a slang term for overpowered. It basically comes from breaking the rules? That's the best way I have to describe it. Returning his attention to Wrath of Jigaku, Naruto chuckled ominously. Needless to say, in Yggdrasil, the sword had to actually be equipped for its effects to apply, but now... I wish I knew about that effect sooner, he mused aloud. I can't help but wonder what else was changed when we ended up in this new world. 9. Once that experiment was concluded and Naruto and the others had themselves a bath to clean off the bandit's remains, the Yuko and his werewolf companion found themselves amid the desolate wasteland of the 8th floor as they ventured forth, chatting about Naruto's plans for the immediate future. I'm surprised by how much of that creature's flirting you're willing to put up with, Lupus Regina commented. I do hope it's worth the information we've gained. Don't remind me, please. Naruto groaned, pinching the bridge of his nose. Every time he opens his mouth, I want to chuck a fireball down his throat. My offer still stands. I'll have to decline, for now. It might complicate things if he went missing. Lupus Regina pouted. Forgive me, Lord Kurama, but you're no fun. Naruto chuckled, looking at her over his shoulder. You guys might not find the slow pace fun, but we really don't know much about what's out there. Naruto sighed. We need information. A lot of information. He who knows his enemy and all that. Quoting humans, boss? Naruto stopped mid-stride as he heard Tayuya's voice. The red-haired Kijo seemingly out of the desert itself like a mirage with a familiar scowl on her face as she approached the duo. You know, when you said you had something for Fumiko to do, I was admittedly relieved at first. You have no idea how many headaches I get from her, but damn am I bored, now. I figured you would be, Naruto chuckled, ruffling his daughter's hair around her horns. Your timing is perfect, by the way. Tayuya raised an eyebrow and cocked her head to one side. Naruto did the same, cocking his head to the same side. Tayuya crossed her arms with another scowl when he didn't elaborate. Naruto chuckled. I'm here to relieve you of that boredom. Tayuya opened her mouth to say something, before his words registered in her head. Whatever scathing remark she had was strangled in its infancy. Really? Believe it. Naruto grinned at her. 10. Tayuya snorted at that. Alright, I'll bite, boss. What d'ya have in mind? Several days later, Fumiko and Sheltir were on the prowl once more, near the southern border, conducting business as usual. Said mission was going rather poorly, though, much to their mild irritation. None of the humans they fought in the last few weeks showed any particular strength or skill that would impress even the lowest of creatures within Nazarick. I'm bored. Fumiko whined childishly. It's been 3 whole days since I got to break someone. And those bandits didn't last long, either. Hearing the young Kijo's complaints, Sheltir sighed wearily. She had felt such elation upon hearing that Lord Kurama entrusted his daughter to her, but her childishness was so unbecoming. Still, she didn't question his creation. And besides, being this overgrown child's mother over the past couple of weeks served as wonderful practice for when she finally made Lord Kurama hers started giving him an army of heirs. Fumiko, dear, stop complaining. It's unfitting of a lady. Sheltir began once her daydreaming reached an end. As the crown princess of Nazarick, you need to learn patience. Fumiko crossed her arms and snorted. I am patient, somewhat. She cleared her throat, averting her gaze. She didn't even need to look to know that Sheltir smelled the bullshit. It's just that we haven't had anything to do for 3 days. I know, honey, but still, we have an image to uphold, Sheltir scolded. We don't want to make Papa look bad, do we? Fumiko grumbled something under her breath. What was that? Sheltir asked sternly. And nothing. After seeing the lowly vampire beating those brides of hers for displeasing her, Fumiko knew better than to get on her bad side. She wasn't into spankings. Good. Now, she should be here any moment. 11. The woman whom Sheltir was mentioning was one of her vampire brides, lesser creatures of the lowly's creation. They were only level 20 or so, but in this world, that was more than sufficient from the looks of it, and she had a small troop of them, or rather a large harem, though Sheltir had only brought 8 of them with her for this assignment. Fumiko didn't want to think about it, mostly because Sheltir liked beating them. Then, the Kijo's train of thought was interrupted by a woman with skin as white as her revealing dress. She had pointed ears and piercing, red eyes with slit pupils and black sclerae, and her raven locks were done up in a feminine bob. Lady Sheltir, the woman said, kneeling before her mistress. There is a rather large company on their way as we speak. The lowly perked up at that. Oh? Would you say any of them might put up a good fight this time? The lower vampire hesitated, unsure if it was a trick question or not. Sheltir, however, wasn't one to be ignored by her minions. Well, I cannot say for sure, she admitted. The bride flinched at her mistress' look of disapproval. They appear to be led by a team of adventurers, 13 strong, she continued. The company itself is around 1,000 strong. Fumiko perked up, hearing the information. Even if they weren't strong at all, such numbers might give her a bit of a workout. What rank are these adventurers? After hearing that Papa was posing as one, when he checked on her, the Kijo was quick to learn of their pecking order. Of course, she relayed that information to Sheltir, since she thought it might be useful in case they encountered any. I did not see any plates of Lord Kurama's description, the bride said. They weren't wearing any, but they are clearly leading the incursion and otherwise fit the description of adventurers. So, they're hiding their rank, or these people are workers, I believe they're called? Sheltir concluded. Yes, milady. Workers? Fumiko questioned. It wasn't a title her papa told her about. Who are they? Apparently, that's what they call former adventurers who've gone rogue, Sheltir explained. So traitors, you mean? Fumiko asked with a frown. The thought of people forsaking their oaths mildly irked her, but the idea of them betraying Papa in particular made her skin crawl. In a sense. The lowly then smiled, sauntering forth. Come, now, Fumiko, let us greet our new guests. A large procession of spear-wielding footmen, bowmen, arbalists, holy knights templar, blessed clerics and destruction-wielding battle mages marched through the woodlands of Riastai's southern border with orders to aid with the Baharuth Empire's subjugation of this heathen kingdom when one of the Knights Templar heard something strange, something unlike the rest of the forest's peaceful ambience. Pausing in his march, the blessed warrior turned to seek the source. Clad in heavy plate, the paladin was a fearsome sentinel of war. He dedicated himself and his entire life to battling monsters that prey upon human souls and training in the ways of the sword, shield, and faith. A man of noble birth and great talent, the paladin represented the epitome of might a human could achieve save for those blessed souls who bore one of the 6 holy bloodlines. It was men like the paladin whose efforts ensured mankind would prevail in a world set out to kill them all, either for food or sport. What's up, bitches? 12. Clang. None of that aided the mighty paladin when a little horned girl barely reaching up to his shoulders appeared right in front of him and, with a swing of her hardy bat, sent him flying over the horizon. His fellows, surprised by the sudden attack but well trained with years of experience, reacted before the paladin's body even felt the blow. Armored knights stepped to the forefront, drawing short swords and holding up their shields. Footmen flanked them in practiced pairs, their long spears leveled at the demon. Bowmen knocked arrows while arbalists loaded their hallowed bolts, the many armsmen of the slain theocracy moving to encircle the intruder. Buffs, auras and blessings were bestowed upon them by the clerics while the battle mages stood back, preparing to weave their spells. The sight of such frigid coordination and steely resolve should have had this foe been anyone else forced even the bravest of monsters to pause. Clearly, they had never met a creation of the Supreme Ones. Oh? Fumiko quirked an eyebrow, the hint of a grin tugging at one corner of her lips. You're not cowering in fright? Their response came in the form of arrows and bolts. Naturally, none of them left even so much as a scratch on her. Ha ha ha. Silent types, aren't ya? Doesn't matter. You schmucks look strong enough to entertain me for a while. Fumiko threw her head back and laughed heartily as arcs of pink lightning crackled over her form, glowing runes of the same color appearing all over her armor. So long as that's the case, I don't care. Ready or not, here I come. Tensing her legs, Fumiko let them have one long second so they could understand just how fucked they were before the ground beneath her feet exploded in a shower of dirt and the pink-haired Kijo rocketed towards the strongest-looking warrior there, plowing through every man who stood in her path along the way and sending them flying as she bulldozed past. Ignoring his weak attempt to swing a sword and the flimsy spear thrusts, Fumiko delivered a punishing blow in the middle of his torso with her Tetsubo, blasting him towards the closest spellcaster and killing the poor sod in the process, squashing him like a bug beneath the knight's armored bulk. Fumiko was unfazed by the spells sent her way as she dashed towards the knight's 2 spearmen. Though her sprint ability still on cooldown, she still vanished in a blur of motion before backhanding one across the cheek with enough force to break his neck and grabbing the second by his face. With a grin and a tug, she threw him into the path of an incoming frostbolt. Come on. Don't tell me that's the best you lot can do. Fumiko shouted, dashing ahead, the force of her forward motion and armored bulk blasting a path of flying bodies through the procession. Ceasing her charge, accompanied by a mighty blast of wind and a thunderclap, she came to a stop before a bowman and, before anyone could react, smashed his chest cavity in. A split second later, she swung around, hitting the chanting cleric on the side of his head, caving his skull in just as well. 2 more men fell soon after, then vanishing in another blur of motion, she aimed her charge at the biggest knight of the lot with another warcry. Before she could crush him like a piece of chalk, the paladin's body glowed with numerous reinforcement buffs, one of which seemed to boost his reaction time. Twisting around so that, instead of smacking into him, she landed on his shield with both of her feet, Fumiko used the paladin as a springboard, crashing into another pair of spearmen and punting their dead bodies into the air. If this is all you guys have, then I'm very disappointed. She didn't even notice 2 fireballs hitting her, seemingly swallowed by an invisible barrier, before batting away the next 3 and sending them into clusters of her enemies. Harder. Faster. Give me all you got. Fumiko shouted at them, her grin widening. Blasting another crater into the dirt, she charged towards the same paladin she did before. When he raised his shield for a block, she stopped, kicking up a small cloud of dirt while spinning on her heels. When he tried to cut at her, she grabbed his wrist with her free hand and broke it with a flick, earning a pained grunt from the blessed warrior. The paladin headbutted her. Fumiko blinked owlishly. Then, her grin turned feral. Is that how you want to play? Drawing back, she headbutted him in turn. Seeing him, his eyes roll back, blood seeping from his eyes and nose, she raised her tetsubo and swung with all her might. Good grief! Shaltir started, shaking her head with a slight smile. The chibi vampire ignored the broken carcass of another paladin as it flew past her and approached Fumiko. She was now in her blood-red armor, a pair of white, feathery wings on her back and a lance shaped like a teardropper in her hand. A tube ran from the butt end of her weapon, connected to Shaltir's back. And with her were the vampire Loli's dozen or so very satisfied-looking brides. You really are an impatient little girl, Fumiko, Shaltir commented, not unkindly. Didn't I say to wait? But they looked so clueless. Fumiko whined, hopping back after caving in the chest of another knight, leaning her head to the side and tilting it in thought when a bolt of holy light whizzed past her right ear. And I was getting so bored just standing there, she said, watching as one of Shaltir's brides started sucking the life right out of the battlemag's throat. The others engaged the last of the remaining knights and their footmen. Tisk tisk tisk. Shaltir looked up at the girl and chided with a gleam in her eyes, waving a finger back and forth. That's not how a young lady should act. Fumiko snorted, kicking up a rock from the ground and launching it at one of the terrified but unyielding footmen with her tetsubo. If nothing else, she had to admit that these humans had guts. I ain't no lady. Shaltir's smile turned into an evil grin. Really? And I thought you said you wanted to make Papa proud. Fumiko crossed her arms. Shaltir continued her minute lecture, holding back a coo at the odd little Kijo's adorable petulance. Having the manners of a brute hardly sounds like a step in the right direction, Fumiko. Your behavior does reflect back on him, after all. The pink cat pouted childishly. No fair. Well, what's done is done, I suppose. Shaltir sighed. The rear company is gone, so all that's left are these few, the forward company and their escort. Come along, now. I'm sure those adventurers will give you some challenge. Fumiko brightened up at that, her pout now gone. You think? Shaltir nodded. Her bride did say the group was led by some strong-seeming adventurers. And they knew better than to lie to her. Fumiko cheered. What are we waiting for then? Let's go. The commonplace, day-to-day chattering that marked the usual lunch break in Karn village suddenly grew louder, livelier when the human half of its denizens caught wind of a strangely dressed wizard approaching them. Said wizard was accompanied by a woman dressed from head to toe in black armor, 2 dark elf children, and a younger, dark-skinned woman with red hair, wearing a weird, robe-like dress. All of the goblin scouts who sighted them felt that these people seemed like bad news, so they were surprised when the villagers looked happy instead of frightened. Though the village folk knew not who the redhead and the little elves were, all possible doubt was removed the instant he and his posse came into view. The hero had returned. Naruto arrived at the eastern gate and was greeted with open arms, much to the delight of his subordinates. They all agreed that this was precisely how their supreme one should be treated, even Tayuya, though she was more chill about it as one would expect. Of course, Enri was the first one to greet them, the village chief in tow. It's so nice to see you again, Lord Ains, the blonde chirped. Same here, Naruto replied, his grin making her cheeks burn. I couldn't help but notice the new fence, though, among other things. Is everything okay? It is now, Enri assured. Also, everyone's more or less eager to see your true form, so no need to hide it while you're here. Needless to say, that got many a curious look from the crowd as they all wondered what he really looked like. Naruto couldn't help but give them a sheepish grin from all of the attention he was getting. Alright, he said. Just so you know, though, my wife and daughter aren't human either. That just added fuel to the fire, much to Naruto's mild embarrassment. And so, he took on his true form, urging Tayuya to do the same and Albedo to remove her helm. Of course, they were a bit more nervous about it, but did as he asked. The villagers all marveled as Naruto allowed for his ears and tails to appear. Many a young boy, meanwhile, was enamored by Albedo's pretty face, not minding the horns so much. Many of the townsfolk did wonder what she and Tayuya were, though. To clear things up, Naruto said, "I am a Kitsune, a race of shape-shifting fox people from a faraway land named Niflheim. The redhead's my daughter, Tayuya, previous marriage as I'm sure you can tell. So, yeah, I'm older than I look. She's an Oni, for the record a species of Far Eastern ogre? Sorry, but her kind is really different from anything in the area, so that's the best I've got." He chuckled, rubbing the back of his head. It wasn't inaccurate. They were closer to demons or monsters, but her specific brand of Oni was close enough to an ogre. Fortunately, he was able to learn rather quickly that Oni don't actually exist here, at least to the knowledge of the Adventurers Guild, so it was safe to assume that Tayuya's variety didn't exist, thus giving the villagers no real basis to be wary of her. 13. Though the goblins appeared to be scared shitless. A female one is called a Kijo, by the way, he added. Her mother was one and I'm part Oni, myself, despite the lack of actual horns, so she's more Kijo than anything, and I'm sure you remember Albedo. Naruto gestured to the succubus and letting them assume that she was the same thing as Tayuya. Finally, the elves are Aura and Mare, friends of the family. Enri, her cheeks red, bowed to them. Hello, and welcome to Karn Village. Tayuya walked up to her and gave the blonde a once-over, which caused the young lass to fidget, before Tayuya sniffed Enri and nodded to herself. I think I'll like you. Her words left Enri equally confused and embarrassed. Gonna have Ta work on at confidence though. Naruto chuckled at their interaction, happy to see Tayuya making friends. She didn't really get along with anyone in Nazarick, save for her sister and the other 8th floor NPCs, so this was very refreshing. Anyway, Lord Ains, Enri sputtered. I'm sure you and your family would like to rest up and eat, we just started lunch and you're more than welcome to join us. The Yuko smiled at that. We'd love to. Chapter 8, Downfall of Castle and Country Part 2. ADV, otherwise called, Run Like a Bitch no Jutsu. Just south of the border, now back in their homeland, 7 battered and bloodied men and women limped on without looking back, without resting. They may be home, but that thing might still be chasing them. 1. The sound of a wolf snarling at them caught the leader's attention, and without even looking at it, he skewered the beast with his spear, shambling away and leaving it to bleed out. Captain Zulfaz Azrael of the Black Scripture had never lost a serious fight before, let alone a fight alongside his comrades, so this was enlightening. There's always a bigger fish, as they say, he muttered. He knew there were 2, in fact, he just thought there were only 2, Platinum Dragon Lord of the Arkland Council State and a godkin with whom he was very familiar, Zeshi Zetsumii. Never in a million years, however, had he imagined himself being bested by a vampire of all things. Or what appeared to be one. He didn't know, nor did he care at the moment. What mattered right now, the only thing that mattered right now, was that they needed to get back, to warn the cardinals of this threat to humanity before it could cause any more trouble. While the poor, unfortunate souls down south hobbled on home, Naruto and his daughter were having a much better time in Karn Village. The 2 redheads, plus Albedo who kept to herself, uncomfortable with the thought of mingling with such lower lifeforms, were seated around a large wooden table outdoors, sitting opposite of the village chief and Enri. The whole of Karn was there, laughing and drinking while listening to Naruto regale them with outlandish stories, including the small troop of goblins Enri had summoned with the horn of the goblin general, most of whom were sending him wary glances from time to time. Enri, laughing at another quirky tale Naruto wove about his homeland, felt a frown tug at her lips as she noticed this. She looked at them with a pout. Stop that, you guys. 5 of the goblins closest to them shared a glance over their table, unsure what they should do. On one hand, they could tell this stranger was trouble with a capital T, but it was clear their lady liked him. Their guts were telling them to keep her away from him, but she obviously wouldn't take kindly to it. He's dangerous, one muttered under his breath, still loud enough for everyone to hear. Hushed arguments broke among their ranks. Throughout their conversation, the Yuko eyed them with a spark of mild amusement in his eyes. He rested his chin on one hand, and listened in for a bit before addressing their leader, who looked a bit flustered. "It's fine, Enri," Naruto assured with a quick chuckle. "If anything, they ought to be praised for having such good instincts. Hell, if I wasn't dangerous, I wouldn't have been able to protect this village." Many a human present shared a hearty chuckle at that. Enri turned her pout, now reinforced with a puffed-out cheek, on him. "But it's so rude." Unbeknownst to her, the blonde earned a shred of respect from Albedo for being so considerate and subservient to her lord. "Again, it's fine," Naruto repeated with a warm chuckle. "I don't mind it at all. And it is their job to protect you," he pointed out. "Mao." Naruto chuckled sheepishly. "I'm sorry, but that was just so cute." Enri blushed, looking away in embarrassment and drawing many an amused chortle from the other villagers. Tayuya elbowed her father. "Oh, stop it, boss," the redhead grunted. "Keep that up and she might pass out. But it's so fun to get her all flustered." Naruto mock-whined teasingly. And now, the poor blonde was bright red from her collar to the roots of her hair. Literally everyone present swore they could see steam rising from her head. Even some of the goblins chuckled at that. The friendly interaction between their lady and the outsider was enough to put most of them at ease. Albedo, meanwhile, did a wonderful job of hiding how much she wanted to strangle the woman. A short time later, at the village as well, Naruto and Enri were having a good-natured squabble over who should carry the buckets back. "I insist," the latter whined. "You've done more than enough for me." "Having you carry them is no way for someone of my stature to treat a lady," Naruto fired back with a warm chuckle. "Relax and let me spoil you." Of course, Enri turned beet red at that. "You're a noble, though," she said. "And the hero of my village. I couldn't possibly let you do all of the hard work." Albedo and Jugum, meanwhile, just stared at the two in confusion. The former had tagged along to ensure the blonde hussy didn't try to seduce her lord, while the latter was here to ensure that this Lord Kurama person didn't try and have his way with Lady Enri. That all being said, Albedo was feeling rather conflicted. On one hand, this worm was daring to go against the will of a supreme one. But, on the other, she was doing so out of common courtesy of all things, wanting to do the manual labor for him like a good underling instead of letting Lord Kurama carry the buckets himself. How was she supposed to react to that? 2. At the same time, though, Albedo knew damn well that this little shit was also putting the moves on her master, making the succubus want to choke a bitch, regardless, but to do so would go against Lord Kurama's orders to be civil. Thankfully, Jugum was there and he came to the rescue, taking the buckets himself with an exasperated, but amused sigh. With that matter settled, the group then started to head back. But then, something started nagging Naruto, so he decided to ask about it. "Hey, Enri," he began. "Could you answer a question for me?" She perked up, looking rather curious. "What do you want to know, Lord Ains?" "It's just, this well seems so far away from your village. Why doesn't anyone build an aqueduct?" "What's an aqueduct?" "You've never heard of one?" Naruto asked with a frown. Considering what he'd seen in Irantal, this world definitely had the tools to construct such a thing. She shook her head. He pursed his lips. "What about a water tower?" Enri put a finger up to her lips. "Maybe?" Naruto sighed and chuckled. "An aqueduct is like a man-made river, I suppose you could say," he told her. "You basically find a water source in the mountains and dig a trench that leads to your village covered in stone and mortar so animals don't get into it, and maybe some filters if you know what you're doing. As for a water tower, it's basically where the water is collected so you can distribute it around the village, kinda like this well here. In my homeland, every house and every home has these small, metal ones that bring fresh water. That sounds amazing. Henry said, wide-eyed. Your home must be a paradise to live in. I suppose it was at one point, Naruto chuckled as they walked past the new fence. I like it better here, though, believe it or not. It's much more. Mid-sentence, Naruto paused, tilting his head. His ears twitched. Something was coming. Seconds after he realized this, a blur of movement raced past the goblin guards and headed towards him. His eyes widened. What was she doing here? FFF, a stuttering, crying Shalltear ran up to him. Naruto knelt down, placing his hands on her shoulders to steady the lowly vampire. Breathe, Shalltear, breathe. Said vampire did precisely that, taking several deep breaths and doing her best to calm herself down enough to speak. Now, tell me, what's wrong? Fumiko. It's Fumiko. Naruto paused, a chill enveloping the village square at that name. Tell me what happened. It was absolute carnage. No less than 1,000 corpses riddled the field, possibly more. It was hard to tell, as more than half of them were, well, only half there. Among the dead were several of Shalltear's vampire brides and what appeared to be 6 adventurers. Naruto didn't know or care what they were, but took note that one was an elderly woman in a gold and white dress, her head blown clean off. Another was a large man with 2 shields, clearly a tank of some sort, a hole in his chest. The third was a black-haired man wielding a chain that reminded him of Aura's whip. He'd been ripped in half. A woman decked out in green and white was also among the dead, a massive hole in her back as she apparently tried to flee. Beside her was a man face up and burnt to a crisp. His armor was mostly blue in color with white and gold accents, and clutched in his cold, dead grasp was a massive, fantastical sword that could only exist in an MMO. Finally, the last one was a boy? Girl? A fucking trap. The final one was a brown-haired trap dressed like a fucking leprechaun. This one lay bloodied and broken, clearly a victim of Fumiko's. And in the center of it all, the completely inert Pinkette stood hunched over with her Tetsubo in hand and a dead look upon her face. What happened? Naruto demanded through gritted teeth. Still hysterical, Shalltear did her best to explain coherently. They came from the theocracy. Banzai. Naruto's pigtailed daughter landed or rather crashed in the middle of the forward company, her beating stick at the ready as a concussive shockwave followed the impact. The impact stunned all who were caught in it, and without wasting a moment, Fumiko dashed forward towards the first enemy she saw. He was short, garbed in green, wielding a rapier, with a cloak and a miniature top hat that made him look like a fop. He was the first to die. The petite girly man-looking fucker's comrades all reeled at the crunch that followed as Fumiko smashed into the back of his spine. She let out a giggle of childish glee and watched him bounce along the ground like a ragdoll, each and every impact accompanied by another crunch or pop. Of course, Shalltear wasn't far behind, brandishing her oddly shaped lance, the vampiric loli carved through the party's entourage. Fumiko, meanwhile, dashed and swung her Tetsubo at another, but this one actually didn't die, much to her surprise and immeasurable glee. The man in question, apparently the leader of this group, grunted in exertion as he parried her blow and tried to counterattack, but it glanced off of her armor, and by the time he pulled his spear back for another try, the Kijo had recovered from the initial shock and deflected his blow with a blissful look that made his skin crawl. Finally, she'd found someone who could put up a fight. While Fumiko tried her best to smash through the human, and as said human tried his best not to die, Shalltear was tearing through the last vestiges of the army. 2 of the adventurers, a large, burly shield-bearer and a man wielding a weighted chain, engaged her, but Shalltear made quick work of the former, her lance piercing through his mighty tower shield like it were made of wet paper. The man with the chain fared no better. When he tried to bash her head in with the weight, Shalltear caught it with nary an ounce of effort before yanking him upwards. Clearly, those wings on her armor weren't just decorative either, as with a mighty flap, she took to the air, dragging the would-be assailant with her and then impaling him as well. Then, she swooped down to attack another of those few who remained. But then, a bright, golden light caught her attention, and when she gazed upon the old woman invoking the power of her apparently magical dress, Shalltear shivered. Such a thing should have been impossible, the undead don't shiver. But, when she saw what the woman was doing, something deep and primal within Sheltir told her that it was dangerous, that she had to run. Raising her free hand, she created a spear of light, covered in magic runes, a circle of magic appearing before the woman's forehead. Sheltir chucked the spear at her. 3. The light drew closer and grew brighter, not ceased by its caster's sudden and brutal death. Get out of the way! Fumiko shouted, slamming into the vampire. And then, the light meant for her hit the Kijo instead. Fumiko! Sheltir cried out, unable to see the last Supreme One's child in the middle of the blinding light. Then, when the light faded, Fumiko stood still and unresponsive, a dead expression upon her face, and the vampiric Loli's vision turned red. When I came to my senses, she was still stuck like that. I didn't know what to do. Sheltir said, wiping away her tears with the back of her hand to no effect as more just kept on coming. Albedo was silent, wanting to berate the vampire, but she couldn't bring herself to do so. Sheltir just looked so pathetic right now. As for Naruto, he suddenly felt more lost than ever before in his life. Never before had he felt such pain. Seeing his baby like this, it hurt so much. Naruto grit his teeth and tried the first thing that came to mind. Dispel magic. A green aura formed around Fumiko and then shattered. The spell had no effect. I tried everything, Sheltir told him, still bawling her eyes out. Dispel magic, greater dispel magic, remove curse, destroy magic, nothing had any effect. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She babbled, hiccuping. Naruto took a deep breath and did his best to calm himself. He looked down to a ring on his left forefinger. This was Shooting Star, a magic ring Momonga-senpai got from Yggdrasil's gacha system before handing it over to him the day before those servers shut down. It was a very simple, but powerful item that allowed him 3 uses of the spell Wish Upon a Star without paying its XP cost. He looked at his daughter and closed his eyes, a blue aura surrounding him as he extended the finger that ring was on towards Fumiko. I wish, he said, to remove this mind control effect on Fumiko-chan. The aura shattered and the spell had no effect, the charge in his ring having gone to waste. And Naruto stood there in utter shock. Even a super tier spell had no effect on his baby girl. And then... Son of a bitch! Naruto roared, punting a nearby severed head as hard as he could and sending it flying clear over the horizon. Albedo and Sheltir flinched, a sense of unimaginable dread washing over them, and then, as soon as it came, it was gone. Turning his head to look down at the crying Sheltir, Naruto tried to say something, but felt himself choke. Closing his eyes and taking a deep breath, he finally found the strength to speak. He then approached her and, in that moment, it took every ounce of Sheltir's self-control for the poor thing not to run away. It wasn't your fault, Sheltir, he said, cupping her cheek and urging the vampire to look him in the eye. He gave her a smile, pained though it may have been. Neither of you could have expected something like this to happen, or done anything to prevent it. What's done is done. Now we just have to pick ourselves up and carry on. But. No buts. Naruto ordered swiftly. Now, can you tell who was responsible? Sniffling, Sheltir wiped her eyes. She looked around. Pointing towards one of the apparent adventurers, she sniffed. There. That one. Naruto took a deep breath and walked over to the headless, elderly woman's corpse. He took one look at her and saw that the dress was definitely magical. It had a strong aura, too. He extended a hand out to her and cast a spell. All appraisal magic item. And then he flinched. No way. Naruto thought. That thing was fucking world class. He took a deep, calming breath. Downfall of castle and country, he mused aloud. Explains why nothing worked, the dress is a world item. Albedo looked at him utterly shocked. Really? Yeah, the only way to guard against them is with another world item, and because its user was apparently killed before the mind control could take full effect, He hesitated. A hard reset is the only thing that might snap her out of it, Naruto said, finishing with a snarl. Truth be told, he didn't even know if that would work. It was just the first thing that came to mind. Damn it! His clawed hands dug into his skin as he gripped his hands, trying to think of some other way to undo what has been done. Nothing. He could think of nothing else. Damn it! Naruto swore again. Meanwhile, as Naruto's rage mounted to greater heights in tandem with his sorrow, a flustered and confused Enri was trying to converse with a suddenly quiet and downtrodden Tayuya. Listen, Tayuya, I don't mean to pry, but, she said, wringing her hands while holding back a blush as she thought of him. Why did Lord Ains leave so quickly, and who was that pale-skinned girl? She looked like a walk-in corpse? Tayuya questioned, giving her a small smile. Enri was startled by her bluntness. Oh no. She shook her hands, I wouldn't go that far. Bullshit, Tayuya snorted crudely, giving her a shrug. Have it your way, though. Then she frowned, growing silent for a moment before letting loose a sigh, and as for why boss left like that. Boss? Enri blinked in confusion. Wasn't this girl Naruto's daughter? I just call him that to fuck with him, Tayuya explained, waving it off. As I was about to say, well, Fumiko's my sister. Sounds like she got into serious trouble. She sighed again, before grumbling to herself. Not that it's a surprise or anything. Sister? Oh, I wasn't aware you had one. Tayuya pushed aside an annoying strand of hair that kept getting in her hair away. Yeah, I'm the younger one, but I swear, I feel like the older one most of the time. Tayuya chuckled weakly. She was sent south with that pale-ass one a bit less than a week ago to take out any of them bitches who got too close to your village. Enri and the chief were shocked to hear that, to say the least. To think he'd go so far out of his way to help them without even letting them know, let alone asking for anything in return. Unbeknownst to them, Fumiko and Sheltir had originally been assigned to hunt bandits in the area for anyone with skills and the like unique to this world, and proved very unsuccessful in that, as no one ever lasted long enough for them to really appraise the poor bastards. Mostly thanks to Fumiko. But, after catching wind of Karn village being attacked while he wasn't looking, he'd given them a new assignment. I never would have imagined that he'd go so far to help us, Enri muttered. I'm guessing he's helping you specifically, Tayuya told her with a shrug. I think he likes ya. The blonde turned beet red at that, sputtering helplessly. The redhead snickered at that. No wonder boss liked teasing her, she was just so cute. But, Tayuya's enjoyment was interrupted by the distinct sound of a gate opening behind her, and she flinched when boss' voice rang in her head. Everyone, back in Nazarick. Now. Something wrong? It was the chief who'd asked this while poor Enri's imagination left her a bit distracted. Gettin' called back. Tayuya sighed. Sorry to cut this short. Are you sure you don't want us to help? Naruto smiled half-heartedly 30 minutes later, giving Cocytus a nod. I'm sure, he said. Literally everyone offered to help, but I just can't bring myself to watch you guys fighting one of your own to the death. This hurts enough as it is. I understand, the massive insectoid told him, placing a hand on the Yuko's shoulder. Be safe, Lord Kurama. As safe as I can be, Naruto replied with a humorless chuckle. Both of my baby girls are fucking beastly in a fight. I made damn sure of that. Cocytus nodded and turned to walk through the gate provided by Oriole. Sheltir, still donning her lance and red armor, opened her mouth to say something, but hesitated. She didn't know what to say, and so, the little vampire wordlessly followed Cocytus back to Nazarick, tears pouring down her cheeks once more. Naruto took a deep, calming breath as he stood before Fumiko a moment later. After ensuring that everyone else had been called back and calming down, he returned here, to where Fumiko still stood unmoving and mentally prepared himself for what he had to do. He stared down the form of his daughter, knowing full well that this would not be easy, physically or emotionally. But he steeled himself. Now or never, Naruto told himself, and with that in mind, he cast his first spell. Reinforce armor. Of course, it was a defensive one. He was intimately familiar with both Fumiko's and his own builds and knew damn well that she was one of the few beings in this world who could actually hit him, and do some heavy damage while she's at it. So, anything that could even slightly tip the scales in his favor would be needed. But, then, she didn't move. Naruto stared and tried another. Shield wall. Again, she didn't move. Then, Naruto recalled that Fumiko hadn't reacted to him trying to cast all of those spells earlier, or to his attempts to shake her out of that trance she was apparently still in. I see. The Yuko muttered, a spark of realization in his eyes. So, you're not gonna react to anything I do unless it's an actual attack, huh? Sorry, honey, but Papa's gonna take full advantage of this. With that established, he cast message. Albedo, he called out. Change of plans. Send the Pleiades, all 7 of them. A pink-haired girl in red hakama and a white Haori disappeared into the portal behind 3 hours later, having been sent back when she and the others were done. The gate spell dissipated soon after. 5. His MP back at full, many a nasty trap in place, and now sporting every single known buff in all of Yggdrasil that could even slightly benefit his build, Naruto spent the next 10 minutes or so making himself look like a damn idiot by running around in a circle repeatedly yelling, "Maximize magic, demonic landmine." After Naruto had a few hours to comb his tits and get his head in the game, the Yuko strategy became more refined as he prepared for the fight. That said, Naruto was careful to only spend 1/4 of his MP on casting that spell, and these weren't the only mines he had planted in preparation for this battle. During his time in Yggdrasil, Naruto managed to recreate a spring-loaded mine he'd once learned about in one of the World War II games he'd played. Known as the Shrapnel Mine 35 and given many nicknames, his favorite being the Bouncing Bitch, said mine was one that shot up 3 feet into the air before exploding. It was by far Naruto's favorite booby trap and he had quite a few of them in place. Knowing Fumiko, more basic shit like bear traps and pitfalls were useless, and she'd just outrun the blasts of conventional mines, so they were all out of the question. But the Bouncing Bitch would be of some use, particularly in conjunction with his Chains of Hell. Again, he needed every single advantage he could get, no matter how small. Not only was she at a major advantage in this upcoming bout, sporting a build tailored for fighting players like himself, but her gear was also on par with his own, and that was saying something. Divine class items could only be crafted, and this could only be achieved by way of inserting data crystals into a vessel of some kind, usually weapons or armor crafted from sufficiently rare materials, and these crystals were incredibly rare drops that Naruto and the others took ages to farm. But farm they did. So, of course, that armor set of hers, Embrace of Lilitu, was among set items. Its first set bonus, which she got from wearing 2 of the 4 items in the set, made Fumiko immune to stun effects and instant death abilities of any kind. So, the likes of Grasp Heart and Assassination were out of the question, as were most of Naruto's crowd control spells and abilities like Sap and Paralysis. Its second set bonus, which came from wearing the gear set as a whole, also made her immune to critical hits, thereby making Naruto's Bloodthirst ability, his primary self-heal, completely useless. And if to add salt to the wound, her armor's second set bonus also quite ironically made her immune to mind control and other charm effects of any kind, reflecting such abilities back to the caster, the victims of this effect being treated as though Fumiko had cast sad spells or abilities upon them. Downfall of castle and country notwithstanding, of course. Such was the power of a world item. That aside, the club she wielded, Thunderclap of the Demon King, was another divine class item. It was a nasty piece of work that doubled her chance to land a crit, which was very useful to her build. Like Naruto's sword, it also had an on-hit effect, reducing the movement speed and physical defense stat of anyone she whacked with it by 50% for 10 seconds. It also had a 10% chance to stun on impact. Thankfully, the slow and sunder abilities of Thunderclap didn't stack, though the duration would refresh if he was hit a second time while they were still up. They did, however, stack with Sunder Armor, one of the most common abilities among martial classes, which she just so happened to have. As the name implied, it was a debuff ability that weakened one's physical defense stat. Needless to say, her gear was far from the only thing that made her dangerous, as one would expect. Finally, not only did he have to deal with all of this shit, but he would have to do so twice because of one of her rings. The item in question, a Ring of the False Life, instantly restores its user's HP to full when it drops to 0. Unfortunately, the damn thing was an extremely rare item that couldn't be crafted, one with an abysmal drop rate and bound itself to its user when equipped. As such, he couldn't just borrow Shell Tears for this. 6. Naruto took a deep, calming breath and mentally prepared himself for the fight to come. "Alright," he said, "it's go time." And with that, Naruto was enveloped by a pillar of blue-white light, several arcane glyphs and incantations floating in the air around him. Meanwhile, back in Nazarick, the Floor Guardians and Tayuya were gathered around the mirror of remote viewing as they watched the fight unfold. "Isn't it a little early for that?" Demiurge asked, as he recognized what was going on in an instant. Naruto was kicking this fight off with a super tier spell. It was the highest, most powerful form of magic, only usable by the Supreme Ones themselves. It's like a skill," Cositus explained. "It doesn't use any MP, but after he's done using it, he won't be able to cast another one for some time." "That, and it's got a long-ass cast-in time," Tayuya chimed in. "Given that Fumiko-chan won't respond until she's attacked, this is the best time for boss to pop one off." "I see," Demiurge commented. He wasn't very familiar with this level of magic, so he didn't know its mechanics all that well. "Thank you for clarifying." Naruto winced as the timer ran out. "Sorry, honey," he said. "This is gonna hurt me more than it hurts you." And boy, was it gonna hurt. What he was about to cast was one of the most powerful single-target spells in all of Yggdrasil, second only to Mistletoe. Devil's Hammer. The pillar of light dispersed and something blew a hole in the clouds above. A flaming projectile, a meteor about the size of a tire, careened towards the still unmoving Fumiko. Boom! The earth shook, the booby traps left untriggered by sheer luck as the meteor hit Fumiko dead center. And then Naruto heard her laughing, cackling, like a madwoman. It legitimately gave him chills. When the dust settled and Fumiko was revealed, a maniacal grin on her face. "That really hurt, Papa." She turned to face him, taking on a stance while she was at it. "You might want to be careful or I'll think you're trying to kill me." "So, you still recognize me," Naruto observed, raising an eyebrow. He also took note that the spell clearly hadn't knocked Fumiko below 50%. "Good. Of course, I do, Papa. Why wouldn't I?" Then, she blinked in confusion. "Wait, why do I want to kill you again?" Naruto frowned and thought. So, Albedo was right about that. The succubus warned him not to let his guard down when he attacked her. Upon pulling up the master screen to check on her status, the image listing the 8th floor NPC's names had hers shown as red and thus hostile. She had also guessed that Fumiko would be very confused, all things considered, but still very prone to attacking him. His words only confused the Pinkette even more, but she pushed it aside. "Doesn't matter," she grunted, pouting childishly. "I did nothing wrong. I was just sitting there, minding my own business, and you went and spanked me out of nowhere." Then her pout turned back into that psychotic grin as she continued. "But, if nothing else, that means I finally have a worthy opponent." What followed was a thunderclap as she was enveloped with pink lightning and charged at Naruto, the earth blowing apart under her as she predictably used sprint to close the gap. As its name implied, it was a class skill that greatly increased movement speed in a sudden, instantaneous burst. Granted to Fumiko through her Berserker class in particular, this ability had a 10-second cooldown, thanks to her high special stat. Knowing her build, she was also likely to be using it in combination with Bull Rush, but, if so, Fumiko wouldn't get the chance to see how far she'd fling Papa quite yet as her charge was cut short. Chains of Hell. that spell stopped Fumiko in her tracks. And soon after those shadowy chains pinned her to the ground, pulling the Kijo down to her knees, no less than 20 little black, metal contraptions shot up from the ground, her sprint and attempted bull rush having triggered every last one of Naruto's bouncing bitches. Then, the instant the little bombs hit the apex of their jumps, they exploded. 7. Gaia. Naruto winced again when he heard the scream, his heart aching at the sight of his baby being showered with shrapnel. But he muscled past it and cast another spell. With her amulet and physical attack stat, those chains would only keep Fumiko pinned down for a few seconds, so Naruto had to make every last one of them count. Unfortunately for Naruto, Fumiko had high-tier magic resistance, like most other LVL 100 characters, so she was immune to most spells below 7th tier. Of course, there were some that bypassed this immunity, Chains of Hell being among them, but Cloud of Knives was the only one he knew that actually did damage, and it was an AoE. Meaning it wouldn't do enough damage over time to one single target to justify its mana cost. In other words, he'd get more bang out of his buck by using spells of a higher tier, so that was precisely what he did. Maximize Magic, Explosion. Boom! The earth shook once more from yet another blast and a mushroom cloud formed as the pink-haired Kijo found herself bathed in hellfire. Still not below 50%. However, through Life Essence, a spell he'd cast upon himself before the fight, he noted that she was getting close, so he cast another spell, this one afforded to him by being a ninja. Kawarimi no Jutsu. Fumiko, chains and all, switched places with Naruto and he stretched his hand out towards her. Hellzone Grenade. 8. Fumiko blinked as every demonic landmine in the area became visible to her. Many dozens of circles and orbs of orange light seemingly flickered into existence around her and she knew damn well what they were. One of the nastier aspects of said spell was that it could be placed on the ground as a circle or in the air as an orb, despite the name, and the spell Papa just cast, Hellzone Grenade, had a very specific effect on them. Oh. Boom. Oh, wow, Albedo muttered uncomfortably, reeling from that last explosion in particular. Even I would have felt that one. And that was saying something. Lord Kurama truly isn't holding back, Demiurge chimed in. He can't afford to, Tayuya said, a deep, worried frown upon her face. Fumiko-chan is really fucking deadly. Yet another mushroom cloud shot upward, this one much bigger than the last, and the tremor that accompanied it could be felt for literal miles. But, when the dust cloud parted in the wake of a black and pink, crackling blur coming towards him, Naruto knew right then and there that he was in desperate need of a blindfold and a cigarette, because this was about to hurt like a bitch. Whack! The Yuko was sent flying back on impact, bouncing away like a tumbleweed and crashing through many a tree and hill along the way, but he managed to roll onto his feet and stop himself just in time to see her. There it is. Naruto thought. The girl was now enveloped with a mantle of black and red fire, her eyes aglow with demonic power and bloodlust as she charged at him. It was a sign that her most powerful ability had been triggered, Demonic Frenzy. And there was no way in hell he was about to do the same amount of damage as Hellzone Grenade had done in a reasonable amount of time, especially not with that gear of hers, so, he only had one option at the moment, run like a pansy bitch until it petered out. Shit. 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 And when he saw her leap into the air, Naruto knew damn well what was coming next and got the hell out of there. Roar. Boom. That barely missed. Despite having seen it coming and knowing where she'd land, Naruto had dodged her attack by a hair's breadth. Nope. 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 He'd only be able to take 3 more of those swings at the very fucking most and he knew it, so Naruto whipped out a greater healing potion and chugged it while he ran for dear life, going up in smoke and reappearing a safe distance away while he was at it by way of Shunshin no Jutsu. Fortunately, he knew damn well that it was only a matter of time before she hit him, so he countered her Tetsubo's movement speed debuff in advance with Speed of the Mongoose, one of the many buffs the Pleiades had stacked him with before this fight. Thanks to that, his natural foot speed, the head start he got from that Shunshin, and the speed boosts he got from being a rogue and a ninja, he was just barely able to outrun her now. Come back here so I can break you like a twig, Papa. Fumiko shouted, her words far too cheerful sounding for his own liking. Hell, no. And from there, the chase was on. On the bright side, he thought, I won't have to worry about scaring off the boys with a daughter like that. Truly, anyone with the balls to throw down with her would have his undying respect. To think she's capable of making a Supreme One flee, Demiurge muttered, clearly very troubled by what he was seeing. Boss knows his limits, Tayuya pointed out, and every little detail about us like the back o' his hand. He has ta run. Least for now. Why is that? Aura asked, looking concerned. Demonic frenzy, Tayuya said. I see. Demiurge replied, knowing full well what she was referring to. Is that an ability of some kind? The elven girl's frown deepened. She didn't like the sound of that. It's a class ability of the demonic berserker, Albedo chimed in. When the user drops below 50% HP, it triggers immediately, leaving them with a minimum of 1 HP if the attack would have killed the user, and doubles the majority of their stats for the next 30 seconds. Now everyone was concerned. That sounded terrifying. It also provides the user with a temporary shield, the succubus continued. Until that shield absorbs an amount of damage equal to what just brought her below 50%, or until those 30 seconds run out, Fumiko is immune to damage of any kind. And that Hellzone grenade did a shit ton, Tayuya added, returning her attention to the fight. So boss is waitin' for that ability to wear off. I'm sorry for making you so broken. Naruto shouted as he zipped on by, still running for dear life. And broken she was. Thanks to a combination of class skills, racial stats, gear, and exploitative motherfuckery, Naruto managed to get her physical attack stat up far beyond 100. One of those skills was a passive one, simply named Brute. Like Naruto's Nimble Warrior, Brute took a set number of points, that being 40 in its case, from MP, and the same amount from magical attack, reallocating them to her physical attack. She'd have 35 in either stat by sheer virtue being a level 100 Kijo were it not for this ability. That said, after accounting for this ability and a few other factors, Naruto got Ankoro Machi Machi to crunch the numbers for him one day, just for shits and giggles, and she came back with a 200 points in that stat. It still wasn't nearly as high as Touchme's hilariously absurd 500, but damn was she a close contender when that demonic frenzy triggered. Seriously, though, how did that man get it so high? Boom. Questions for later. Naruto let loose a surprisingly girlish yelp and ran the other way as yet another strike just barely missed. Oh fuck all kinds of duck. Thanks to another ability of hers, Mighty Leap, Fumiko had just launched herself at Naruto in an attempt to take a swing at him, but the Yuko had seen her using it, and stopped running at the last second, resulting in his daughter flying right over his head. The ability also had a 5-second AoE stun effect, but he managed to evade that, too, just like last time. Thanking whatever god may be smiling down upon him for global cooldowns still being a thing in this new world, he went up in smoke and kept running. 9. Fumiko huffed in annoyance and continued her pursuit. Unfortunately for her, that ability had a 25-second cooldown, so that was her last chance to hit him with it while Demonic Frenzy was still active. The fact that she'd used it twice also told Naruto that this game of cat and mouse was almost done. As if on cue, the instant that thought crossed his mind, that aura dissipated, her eyes returning to their golden hue. She also started slowing down, her movement speed having also been reduced to normal. Naruto took notice immediately and spun around to meet her gaze a good 30 feet away as he pulled Wrath of Jigaku from its scabbard. Checking her HP once more, he saw that she was higher than it should have been. That one blow she'd landed was pretty rough, too, so Naruto knew it was a crit, meaning she'd healed back some of the damage dealt by his Hellzone grenade, thanks to Bloodthirst, which she of course had access to as well. It was one of the reasons why Demon Knight was such a deadly combination with Demonic Berserker. The abundance of self-heal abilities combined with her ring of regeneration and demonic frenzy meant that she could potentially end up in a state of nigh constant frenzy, her HP going back up to above 50% by the time her shield went down, meaning she could trigger it again, and again, and again, the duration and shield refreshing every time. This, in combination with all of her stuns and knockbacks, was how she aided in the defeat of the 8 Guild Alliance, and just another reason why Naruto ran when demonic frenzy triggered, and why he wasn't using Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Any crit she landed on them would still count back in Yggdrasil, and he didn't want to test if it did here, for obvious reasons. Of course, Fumiko hadn't stopped running towards him, so Naruto cast another spell. Grinding Sphere. An orb of spiraling, blue energy formed in his free hand and the Kitsune chucked it right at his charging daughter. But, Fumiko barreled right through it, completely ignoring the damage done as it hit her dead center and exploded in a deadly burst. 10. Mirror Image. Then, just as Fumiko used another sprint, her Tetsubo about to come down upon Naruto's head, a dozen more Kitsune appeared and the one she swung at faded from existence. When he did, the Kijo then screamed in agony once more at the hot pain erupting across her back. Fumiko roared and took a swing at him, but then he faded away once more and she felt another hot pain across her back, and another, and another. And with every hit, she felt heavier, her strength starting to wane. She knew it was a debuff of some kind. Despite her armor being completely intact and the fact that his sword did fire damage, Naruto could smell the blood as it started to spill, thanks to another ability of his, Grievous Wounds. It was a fairly common one among martial classes, one that caused the target to start bleeding profusely, dealing damage over time until they were healed. Unfortunately, Fumiko-chan also had a counter for that, her Ring of Regeneration, a divine class ring that buffed the wearer's resistance and HP stats while also having the damage of bleed effects and passively healing its wearer for 1% of their HP every 5 seconds. Of course, as a tank, Naruto had one too, but the ring in question was more dangerous on her for a number of reasons, which was just another reason why he needed to end this first round quickly. Fumiko snarled, lashing out as best she could to try and hit Naruto, but it was to no avail. Every last swing missed completely, opening her up for another hit, followed by another, and another, and another. More and more, her body got heavier, more and more, her vision got blurrier, and when the 5th hit landed, she started feeling cold. Naruto roared and with one last swing, he struck Fumiko down and she started to fade away. When she did, the Yuko fell to his knees, racked with grief. He wanted to hurl, but he needed to do this, he needed to knock her back out of that. Then, he looked up as she started fading back into existence a good 20 feet away. Wah! Fumiko groaned, wobbling goofily. That felt weird. Naruto perked up, a gleam of hope in his eyes. Now that he thought about it, the Ring of False Life technically counted as a free res because it respawns the user at full health, free of debuffs and the like. Their cooldowns aren't reset, though, nor is their MP, but still, perhaps this was all he needed to do. Maybe, just maybe, the ring was good enough? Gotta admit, Papa, Fumiko chirped, I wasn't expecting you to get the drop on me like that, though I guess I should've, you are a ninja, after all. Yeah, the Yuko replied with a sad smile. I am. And then his hopes were all but dashed when the Pinkette took on a fighting stance, her armor aglow once more. It won't happen again, though, she growled eagerly. I know all of your tricks, Papa, and I will win, this time. Naruto shuddered, feeling sick to his stomach once more and gripping his sword tightly. Now for the hard part, he muttered. Killing her once was hard enough, both physically and otherwise, but now, he had to do it a second time. Even his dark side, the character with whom he'd battled time and time again to keep himself from acting like a monster, couldn't bear the thought of harming his baby girl, and both Naruto and Kurama wanted to hunt down whoever was responsible for this situation and make them suffer. But, that would have to wait. Despite his reservations, Naruto got up and prepared for battle once more. Feast of Blood. The crimson gore spilled by that last exchange seemingly came to life and leapt towards Naruto as his form took on a crimson glow, invigorating him, healing him, the lingering aches and pains he still suffered from her first blow now fading away. His daughter, meanwhile, just giggled and let the spell run its course. The Pinkette was just having so much fun that she wanted this fight to last as long as it could. Naruto sighed in relief, rolling his shoulders and taking a half-hearted stance. "You ready, Papa?" Fumiko questioned eagerly. The evil grin brought an odd smile to Naruto's face. She was so adorable, but at the same time, that somehow made this both easier and harder. It was a strange feeling. Ready as I'll ever be. He sighed again. Fortunately, he still had more than 2/3 of his MP left and now he was back at full health, so he had more than enough fight in him, physically speaking, at least. Good. Fumiko chirped, her grin widening with her growing bloodlust, before the ground beneath her feet exploded. Cursing, Naruto got the hell out of her way with a well-timed Shunshin no Jutsu. Then, soon after she zipped on by, he chucked another grinding sphere at her. Fumiko cried out and spun on her heel, but Naruto was already prepared for her charge. Grease! The Pinkette fell flat on her face while her father backed away. Then, the Yuko opted for one of his class skills this time around, one that he could use once a day per tail. His tails fanned out, a little ball of ghostly fire flickering into existence at each tip. Kitsunabi. This was a spell-like ability of the Kitsune racial class. Initially functioning as a first-tier fire spell, it scaled with its user to a maximum of 9th tier, as indicated by the number of fireballs per usage. At its strongest, this fire was said to be capable of setting the sun itself ablaze. Then, with 9 flicks, the fireballs in question flew towards the prone Kijo and lit her the fuck up. As one would expect, the grease only amplified this ability's potency, but at the cost of being consumed immediately. Naruto was forced to raise his arm so that he could shield his eyes from the intense glow, feeling yet another pang in his heart. He didn't know how high the fire went, but the in-game manual said it could melt through dwarven alloy, which was equivalent to modern, industrial-grade steel. Considering that stuff could withstand temperatures of over 2000 degrees Celsius. Naruto winced, his heart ached at the sound. But, he forced his grief down and, while his GCD ticked away, the Yuko backpedaled some more to ensure that he was out of her reach. So, when she tried to charge again, he backpedaled some more while casting Chains of Hell. Of course, there was a reason he didn't just cast Fly to stay out of her reach and pepper her from afar. Naruto gave her something for that too, the Blackwing Amulet. It was only relic class, but still very useful for her build. In addition to reducing the duration of pindown effects by 50% and doubling her natural movement speed, it also granted her the ability to fly for up to 1 hour a day, which was more than long enough to be a problem if she ended up using that. So, he kept his ass on the ground in hopes that she would do the same, which she did. It pained him so much to be exploiting her personality like that, but he knew Fumiko-chan hated fighting dirty, and if he was going to live through this, he'd have to use every advantage he had. Maximize magic, explosion. Boom. With his head now in the game, Naruto just kept kiting her from there, using all of his tricks, speed, and agility to evade her attacks. There was no room for him to make even the slightest of mistakes. She knew how he fought and she wasn't giving him any time to think, so he just acted and prayed for the best. Eventually, their fight brought them back to where it all started. Papa, his daughter growled childishly, her temper obviously fraying after failing to hit him for what felt like an eternity. Sit still. Sorry, honey. Naruto grunted, not so much parrying her attack as he redirected it, aiming the majority of its force away from him. There was no actual way he could block her hits dead on. Papa can't do that. He very much likes living, you know. Gnashing her teeth, his daughter renewed her assault with a demonic roar, but Naruto poofed away just in time to evade. That ability was bad news, too, being a ranged knockback that stuns anyone caught in the blast wave for 5 seconds, seconds he knew she'd use to their fullest to try and stunlock him. Needless to say, he simply could not let that happen. Grease. As such, Naruto pulled a fast one on her and cast another spell. What followed was a predictable thump as poor Fumiko fell flat on her face. Kitsunabi. Boom. This is hard to watch, Aura commented. She let out a sigh and started rubbing Shell Tears back comfortingly as the vampire Loli kept bawling her eyes out. No parent should ever have to go through something like this, Albedo growled. When I get my hands on the bastards who did this to her, I will make them wish they were never born. Aura glared at her as Sheltier's bawling grew louder. Nice way to rub in the salt, Albedo. Tayuya, meanwhile, let out a sigh and got up to walk away. Aura looked at her oddly. Where are you going, Tayuya? I can't keep watching she said evasively, headed for the doorway. When she reached it, she stopped and looked down at her feet. I'll be back in a bit. Yet another blast rocked the countryside as a panting Naruto averted his gaze. He simply couldn't bear to look anymore. Papa! The groaning sound coming from what looked like a lump of charcoal broke him out of his stupor. Turning his gaze back towards her, his ears and tails drooped. Fumiko! Papa! Fumiko moaned, moving her arms and slowly painfully raising herself on her hands and knees. Naruto watched, silent and solemn. Her limbs buckled, barely having the strength to support her weight. Bits and pieces of her armor seeped down her form like a mass of viscous, disturbing ooze, having been melted by the extreme heat. Papa's very sorry, honey. Papaya! Naruto's eyes widened when Fumiko managed to stand up and charge him again, covering the distance between them in what seemed like the blink of an eye. That black and red aura had returned and she took another swing at him. Shit! Naruto felt his bones pop at the sheer force and he cursed himself for not keeping track of Fumiko's HP as her Tetsubo slammed into his chest. He coughed up blood and he was sent flying once more, bouncing along like a damn ragdoll all the way. That was a stun and a crit. That was a stun and a crit. Shit, 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 shit. Rah! Boom! Then, with a mighty leap, the frenzied Pinkette slammed her Tetsubo down hard, causing Naruto to bounce up and then she smacked him again. Thankfully, she didn't stun him a second time or land another crit, so by the time he was done bouncing, that 5-second stun from her mighty leap had already worn off and he went up in smoke. Dragging his sorry ass up, a good distance away, Naruto shook his head. His ears were ringing and he felt like he had a concussion. This is way worse than any PvP I've been through. Naruto though idly, sweating bullets as he got the fuck out of Dodge, another potion in hand. All Fumiko needed was another clean hit with that bat of hers and he'd be out. Get back here and fight me like a man. Naruto pumped his legs faster as he ran for dear life once more. Nope. 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 And so, the chase was on once more. This time, however, Naruto was quite a bit more prepared and did everything he could to keep her at bay. Chains of hell. Once more, Fumiko was pinned down by that infernal spell, but unlike before, it barely lasted a second before shattering like glass. It was a second that Naruto didn't waste, however, as he kept running without skipping a beat. But then, something grabbed his attention, as well as Fumiko's. The both of them perked up at a shrill, melodious sound coming from above. It was a flute. 11. She didn't. Demiurge muttered. Albedo couldn't help but smile. She did. I mean, that is her sister, Aura chimed in. If that was Mare or even Sheltier, I wouldn't be able to just sit back and watch either. But Lord Kurama's orders, the bespectacled demon sputtered half-heartedly, before getting playfully shoved by the small elven girl. Oh, don't be such a grouse. Demiurge frowned deeply but said nothing. Truth be told, he was tempted to do the same, but the demonic floor guardian had an image to uphold. Teuya. Fumiko whined. No fair. Indeed, it was. The redhead in question now floated well above Naruto and Fumiko, playing a tune on her flute, a black vortex still closing behind her. The Pinkette, meanwhile, felt drunk, and not in a good way. She felt heavy, she could barely move, her knees weak and vision blurred. Naruto, meanwhile, felt invigorated, the pain was gone and even the dizziness he'd still felt from that last blow was ebbing away. Even the fatigue was gone. Hell, the Yuko felt like he could run a mile, slay a dragon, and take on a small country. All in the same evening. But, at the same time. Sorry baby girl, Naruto lamented, turning around to face his still frenzied daughter. Daddy's gonna have to hurt you now. A lot. Once more, the Pinkette was enveloped by black chains of shadow, these being far stronger than Naruto's, as his younger daughter was a dedicated support caster. You know I hate spankings. Fumiko muttered grouchily, feeling herself grow more and more sluggish. Stop you, her father grumbled. Then, he took a deep breath and drew his sword, leveling it at his creation. This is hard enough already. The Pinkette giggled, goody, nothing easy is fun. That put a smile on her creator's lips, albeit a sad, shaky one. Tayuya's music then stopped abruptly and the redhead yelled at him. Stop pussyfooting and beat her ass already. That spell ain't gonna last forever, damn it. Naruto's smile abruptly widened. Her rough, but good-natured words made his spirit soar despite the situation. He really was happy he had them. Tayuya, darling, thank you. Then the smile dropped, and he prepared to face his daughter in mortal combat once more. 12. And when he finally got his claws on them, the bastards responsible for this mess were going to pay dearly for making him do this. Chapter 9, Trinkets, Presents, and World Domination. A somber Naruto could be found carrying his unmoving baby girl in his arms, deep within a massive, sealed-off location wherein Ainzel Gown kept all of their loot. The only point of access was through a teleportation circle in a hidden chamber of the throne room, and the only opening was through a long hallway lined with 40 golden statues. Thanks to some restoration magic on Tayuya's part, the fallen Pinkette was no longer grafted to the insides of her armor, but it was in definite need of repair. But, that was just another reason why they were here. Pandora's actor, the last NPC created by Ainzel Gown, would undoubtedly be more than happy to repair Embrace of Lilitu for them, but that would come later. Can't help but wonder if there are any other rooms I don't know about, Tayuya muttered, looking to be in deep thought while eyeing the new ring on her hand. Of course, she was by his side, having refused to stay behind. As much as they bickered and fought, Fumiko was her sister. Her obstinate, prideful, haughty, overconfident big sister. There's one or two you might not want to know about, Naruto told her, a half-hearted, but much-needed chuckle leaving his lips. His lips quirked upwards in a facsimile of a smile at the thought. Ainzel Gown was made up of a bunch of oddballs, you know. I suppose, Tayuya murmured before looking up and eyeballing the statues. She noted that above each one was a symbol found on the flags she saw on their way here. So, these are the other supreme ones, I take it? Yup. Indeed, they were. Each and every one of those statues were all high-tier golems, modeled after the other 40 members of Ainzel Gown, and sporting the best gear of said members. I'll tell you more about them later, Naruto added. You and Fumiko-chan. When they entered the treasury, Tayuya had to consciously keep her mouth closed for fear of gaping like a fool. The space, for there was no way she could call this place a room, was practically an entire floor on its own. And it was filled to the brim with glittering, well-polished gold. Welcome to the treasury, Tayuya-chan. Naruto smirked, nodding at the heaping mountains of coins, valuables and gems piled ridiculously high. It was the financial culmination of all the hard work Naruto and his guildmates had put into this place, and it showed. The place was so vast it couldn't even fit beneath the tomb of Nazarick, but existed in a separate location accessible only from the throne room. Even what they could see was really just a tiny fraction of the actual sum of the treasury. Holy shit. Fun fact, I could take a handful of this place, melt it down into clumps and collapse the economy of the whole known world. Gold is gold, not many people care where it comes from. Shovel too much of it in, however, and it will start to lose its value. Holding Fumiko closer to his chest, the Yuko glanced back at his other daughter. Honey, you're gaping. Tayuya closed her mouth with a click. With another much-needed chuckle, he turned his attention to the pile of gold. Alright, he thought aloud, if I remember right, 1,000 per level up to 50, double for every level beyond that, times 2, because I'm not a divine caster. After considering a few more factors and ignoring others that didn't apply, Naruto nodded. That pile of gold in front of them looked like it'd be more than enough. Placing Fumiko down on the ground before him, he reached into his inventory and pulled out the staff of Ainsul Gaon. Before he could start, though, Naruto saw some movement out the corner of his eye, but paid it no mind. He knew exactly who it was, having seen her following them for some time now. Tayuya immediately pulled out her flute and took on a defensive stance, having not expected anyone to be here. "Whoever's there, come out." Her words had quite the bite to them as they echoed throughout the chamber. Humbly, Shaltir stepped out from behind a stone pillar. Tayuya relaxed, but her voice lost nary a drop of its venom. "Oh, it's just you." She raised her chin and put her hands on her hips. "The fuck do you think you're doing here?" Her opinion of the little vampire in question wasn't really favorable at the moment. Now, Naruto said, placing a hand on the redhead's shoulder. "She feels guilty enough." Tayuya huffed but got the hint. Satisfied that Tayuya would keep her tongue in check, for now, Naruto turned to regard Shaltir with a curious look. Tayuya's question, rudely worded as it might have been, is a good one. "So, what does bring you here, Shaltir?" "I wanted to make sure she'd be okay," the vampire muttered, averting her gaze. "As you said, I feel incredibly guilty for being so careless. If I was just a little quicker, she wouldn't have." Now, he said, giving her a smile. "That's enough, you. I said it wasn't your fault and I still stand by that." Shaltir shuffled her feet, dipping her gaze away from that smile. She didn't feel right about seeing that smile directed at her. She didn't deserve it. Naruto sighed, hoping she'd get out of that soon. If nothing else, though, having Fumiko back would definitely lift everyone's mood. "Right," he chirped. "Time to get my baby back." The Vulpine demon then raised his staff to the nearest mountain of gold and gave his command. "Fumiko, revive." And when he did, the coin seemingly melted, before everyone's eyes, flowing towards the prone Pinkette like a river and encompassing her. It all then started to vanish, seeping into her skin. It wasn't so much of a spell as it was an admin command, made possible by the staff, but it certainly worked like one, save for the lack of an MP cost. Also, because Fumiko was an NPC, she wouldn't receive the 5-level penalty, unlike a player. Once it was done, though, and all of the gold had been consumed, nothing seemed like it changed. Fumiko was still lying, lifeless, on the ground. "What happened?" Tayuya demanded, running up to Naruto. She simply couldn't hold it in anymore upon seeing the resurrection seemingly fail. "Why isn't she moving? Dad! Why isn't she moving?" Tears started prickling at the corners of her eyes. Naruto smiled and patted her head, feeling his heart clench in happiness. Fumiko and Tayuya were his creations. He'd made them, he had nurtured their backgrounds and mannerism, he'd seen them evolve through the years they existed. Hanging around the two NPCs, even if they were just a collection of integers and strings, had always been a guilty pleasure of his during the glory days of Ainsul Gaon. For the redhead to actually call him dad, even when she was programmed to call him boss, well, Naruto had always wanted to have a family. An actual, real-life, family. There, he whispered, "It's all right. There, look." He pointed at Fumiko's chest, which was slowly, shallowly, rising up and down. "She's alive. There's nothing to worry about." He circled his arms around her and brought her head down to his chest. So. She's fine." Tayuya hiccuped into his torso, staining his clothes with her tears. "She'll be fine, right?" "Yes, she'll be fine. She just needs some rest. My build was never meant to res others, I can do it despite that, but I'm still not very good at it. That said, she'll take a bit longer to fully recover as a penalty. Give her a couple hours and I'm sure she's going to be bouncing around again in no time." 1. "She better," Tayuya sniffled, before drawing back and punching him. "You saw nothing. You heard nothing. She glared at him, crossing her arms to appear menacing. All it did, however, was make her look incredibly cute, with her round, rosy cheeks modeled after his mother, from the sole picture of her he'd found, and haughty facial lines. In fact, she looked like a tantrum-throwing little princess. Naruto threw his head back and laughed his heart out. He loved his new family. Tayuya stomped her feet. Boss. I mean it. Alright. Naruto chuckled, your secret's safe with me, honey. It better be. Tayuya huffed. And Shaltir, he added with a crooked grin. Wah. Tayuya whirled around to level a glare on the chibi vampire, having forgotten that she was still here. Shaltir offered her a hollow smile and nodded her head. Since we got that out of the way, though, Naruto said. I'm gonna need to get her out of that armor so Pandora's actor can repair it. Oh, so he does exist, Shaltir commented, perking up. Of course, he does, Naruto said, gesturing to the spoils with his guild staff. Somebody needs to keep track of all this loot. But what's the point of hoarding it all? Tayuya asked, leaning her head to the side in the same manner as her father and sister. I mean, if it's just sitting there. As you just saw, Naruto told her, it takes gold to res one of you, a lot of it. Also, a lot of Nazarik's defenses have an upkeep cost, so we farmed a shit ton of it for good measure, especially after that 1,400 strong invasion you helped stop. As expected of the Supreme Ones, Shaltir said with a happy sigh. Always prepared for anything. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. I'm actually kinda shit at planning ahead, he admitted. We all have our weaknesses, but I do my best. In fact, the only reason he was able to do as well as he had in the fight with Fumiko was because of how much experience he had in PvP and his intimate familiarity with her build. As Shaltir processed that information, Naruto put the staff of Ain Zulgown back into his inventory and knelt down beside his sleeping baby girl. Now, would you two minds giving me a hand with this? Naruto asked, feeling a bit weird as his hands hovered over a sleeping Fumiko. We need to get the armor off of her. He took a moment to find the latches and, as his luck would have it, the damn things were slightly melted, but that shouldn't be too much of an issue. Ah! There it is! Naruto exclaimed, managing to get one to pop open. The rest followed suit, some more easily than others, and with a grunt, the Yuko managed to force the breastplate open, only to realize that whatever Fumiko had been wearing underneath has been reduced to ash, save for the jewelry. Her armor had taken the brunt of the damage, which made sense, though he couldn't help but wonder if rings and amulets were indestructible like they were in-game. 2. I didn't think that through, he muttered, quickly averting his gaze with a heavy blush. Nor did he remember giving her such a nice rack. Clearing his throat, Naruto looked away. Well, she is dressed. The outfit in question that now covered Fumiko was one of the risque dresses Shaltir's vampire brides wore. It was the only thing any one of them had on hand, since all of Kushina's clothing was back in his room. That, and it never occurred to them to just grab one of the robes in the nearby shelves, on account of everyone being so damn distracted. Tayuya averted her gaze. The nosebleed that threatened to come forth upon seeing Fumiko so scantily clad burst through the instant she saw that tent. Yeah. Scratching his chin, Naruto with a large, mental heave of effort managed to avoid staring. Did Oni even care about blood relations in that context? Their reservations are on par with those of a succubus. Those words, spoken in his mind in the voice of Parent Roncino, didn't help. Shaking his head to banish those bad thoughts, he turned to regard a flustered vampire. Shaltir, he said. The girl in question flinched, averting her gaze. I wasn't staring, m'lord. I promise. Bullshit, Tayuya grunted. She totally was, specifically at his crotch. I wasn't. Shaltir hissed. You were staring. Tayuya sputtered, her cheeks lighting up. W-ah? No, I wasn't. Were too. He's my fucking father, you pervert. Not that she cared, of course, but she didn't want him to know that, unless she knew he didn't mind. That's rich coming from someone checking out, said Father. Shaltir huffed. A god is above such trivial things, anyway. Tayuya's ears burned. Why, you hussy? Meanwhile, it's not you I'm worried about, Shaltir. Naruto thought ruefully, their verbal spar going right over his head as the Yuko's lower one clouded his senses. In the future, a part of him would lament his chance to nip a certain redhead's Oedipus complex in the bud having been lost. Shaltir, he called out again, breaking them apart, I have a task for you. The vampire stopped dead in her tracks, stood straighter, and gave him her undivided attention. She would never fail him again. Never. I'm yours to command, Lord Kurama, she answered eagerly. Naruto nodded. He already knew that by now, all the NPCs would listen to him without a question, but being nice about it wouldn't hurt anyone. He didn't want this absolute power over them getting to his head, after all. Fumiko should wake up in about 2 or 3 hours. Bring her to my quarters and keep an eye on her until I get back. Understood. Lord. It shall be done. Tayuya raised an eyebrow at Naruto and crossed her arms. She didn't appreciate being separated from her sister so soon. And what will we be doing in the meantime? Making sure this never happens again, he told her cryptically. The fuck does that mean? Once the father-daughter duo made it past the gas chambers, spike pits, poison dart traps and the like, they stood before a password-locked gate. This led to the mausoleum located inside the heart of the treasury of Nazarick, containing all of the rarest, most powerful, and most dangerous items the guild had collected over the course of their existence, save for the gear that Naruto, those golems, and about a dozen NPCs had been decked out with. Turning around, Naruto leveled a cautious look at his daughter. Before we enter, Tayuya, you should know, the guardian of this place is probably a bit eccentric. Tayuya looked at her father blithely. Well, that's definitely out of the norm, boss, she said, sarcasm dripping from each syllable. We're totally not a band of weirdos. Naruto chuckled. It was good to see some of her spunk returning after seeing her so sad. The amusement was good for his soul. But Naruto quickly sobered up and looked at Tayuya sternly. I mean it, darling. The area guardian of the treasury is on par with Demiurge and Albedo. So, another freak? Now. Don't go around calling your comrades names. Especially your cousin. It's not nice. It felt weird calling him that, but Naruto did aid in the NPC's creation, and calling him her brother felt weirder, precisely because Momonga-senpai was the other party involved in that. Of course, the lich in question did most of the work, but Naruto was more than happy to help in creating the living tribute to the family they once shared. Tayuya huffed. Does it matter if it's true? It was a rhetorical question. Naruto sighed, exasperated. For whatever reason, his little ones didn't get along with Albedo at all, which was precisely why he was worried about how she'd react to Pandora's actor. Look, just don't react too strongly towards him, he has some wicked defense mechanisms that might activate if you do. Taking his warning at face value, Tayuya nodded reluctantly. Making their way through the passage, Naruto and Tayuya heard a flamboyant, male voice calling out to them. Thank you for coming all this way, he said, before a man in a red and yellow uniform modeled after that of a World War II German military officer, and seemingly made by a drunken tailor. He had porcelain whiteskin, 3 fingers and a thumb on either hand, and no face, 3 holes where it should be, resembling those of a bowling ball, served as the mockery of one. The bean goose stepped into their line of sight, turning to face them and stood at attention with the dramatic click of his heels. How can I, Pandora's actor, be of service to you, Mein Führer? 3. What the fuck is that? Tayuya asked, pointing a finger at the aforementioned that. As if Tayuya's words were a trigger, the entity rose up, chuckling darkly. He prepared to give a grand performance, no doubt. Being one of his creators, Naruto knew he was a prankster at heart. But, right now, he wasn't feeling up to this being's brand of comedy. Pandora's actor. Naruto barked, putting as much of a commanding weight to his voice as he could. I'm not in the mood for your jokes at the moment. Drawing back in surprise, it didn't take long for Pandora's actor to click his heels together in a mockery of Prussian traditions and raise his hand up to his hat in an overacted salute. We wünscht, mein Führer. I apologize, I was simply bursting with energy. He bowed like a theatrical performer, before standing up and taking a more uniformed pose. I reiterate, then, what can I, Pandora's actor, do for you today, Lord Kurama? What is the purpose of thy visit? And who is this fair maiden you bring along? Fair maiden? Tayuya exclaimed, face distorted in a grimace, before fetching her flute and smiling darkly. I'll show you a faiao. The pinkette yelped when Naruto swatted her ass with one of his tails. Buzz! She whined indignantly, giving him a childish pout. Naruto glanced at her with narrowed eyes. Behave, you. Tayuya grumbled under her breath, rubbing her ass cheek with a blush. Fine. Naruto shook his head. The two really were sisters in every way possible. Thankfully they weren't twins, though, that would have doomed them all. Pushing those thoughts aside, Naruto readdressed Pandora's actor. She's one of my daughters, he said. That aside, what can you tell me about that world item I brought here earlier? Oh, that wonderful dress, Pandora's actor declared. Downfall of Castle and Country. It is an amazing item indeed, absolutely wunderbar. To think that such a rare gem could be found within this new world. Naruto sighed, holding the bridge of his nose and nursing back a headache. He was certain Momonga was laughing at him, somehow. Just, can you tone that stuff down, right now? My head is killing me. Oh. My apologies, Lord Kurama. The doppelganger bowed respectfully. As I was saying, it is indeed a world-class item, comparable to all of the others. Really now? Naruto perked up at that. Are you familiar with the ones we don't have? My apologies, mein Führer, Pandora's actor lamented, giving an apologetic bow. I only know of the 12 we currently possess. It's fine, the Yuko chuckled. Just curious is all. Speaking of, I'd like you to fetch Downfall of Castle and Country for me, as well as the 8 Shaku curved jewel necklace, depiction of nature and society, avarice and generosity, and the Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch. 5. L. Lord Kurama. These are all items of immense power, the oddity exclaimed. Has the time come to unleash it upon the world? In a manner of speaking, Naruto said evasively. Just fetch me the hand grenade and Downfall for now and have the rest of them prepared in an hour or so. Oh, one more thing. He reached into his inventory and extracted the damaged gear of his still sleeping daughter. I'd like you to repair this for me in the meantime. Pandora's actor saluted overdramatically. We wünscht, mein Führer. I shall have these legendary treasures, so mighty and potent even supreme beings such as yourself deign to lock them away, which make the impossible possible, that can change the face of the very world. An embrace of Lilitu will be restored as long as it's within my power. Pandora's actor. Naruto sighed, please, use your inside voice. Apologies, Lord Kurama. Now, please bring me the items I requested. Of course, mein Führer. Not even 5 minutes later, Tayuya was staring oddly at an article of clothing Naruto was holding out towards her, now spotless and on a hanger. It's a dress, she said, flatly. Yes, it's a dress, Naruto confirmed, smiling. Tayuya crossed her arms. What part of that badass name could reflect on a dress? It's a badass dress, Naruto chuckled. And the dress of mindfuckery belongs in the hands of a mindfucker. I wanna punch you. Tayuya grunted, looking more closely at said dress and imagining all the wonderful things she could do with said item, particularly involving those who dared to use it on her sister. Then, she smiled darkly. But, you're not wrong. Atta girl, Naruto said, handing it over to her. I suppose we should get you back to your room and... The Yuko flinched and sputtered when he saw Tayuya starting to undress, nary a single fuck to give. Before he could even manage a single word, the girl was left in nothing but her boots and underwear, and she didn't wear a bra. She then snatched up the dress and put it on without a second thought. Naruto only continued to stare. As Tayuya checked herself out, looking down at her body, twisting and turning around, her motions and poses highlighting all of her taut curves, Naruto kept on staring. The redhead then turned around to face him and noticed his dazed look. What? Tayuya asked, does it fit? I think it's a bit snug. She trailed off, lowering her gaze to look at the dress, only to notice that the tent had returned. There was a long, awkward silence shared between the Kijo and her vulpine father, and then Naruto cleared his throat. I think it looks wonderful on you, honey. Right. Thanks. Truth be told, she was legitimately flattered, but equally embarrassed. It certainly stroked her ego to know she, despite being relatively unremarkable in comparison to the others, could affect what was, for all intents and purposes, a god in such a way. And her father was everything she thought a girl might want: powerful, kind, very attractive, great with kids, as she and her sister could attest. Her ears and cheeks burned with the heat of the sun as her mind dove straight into the gutter. It took every ounce of self-control she had to dislodge the lewd thoughts that followed. Now is not the time for that. Later was fine, of course, but not now. Tayuya cleared her throat, addressing her creator. So, you said something about the throne room? All right. Naruto took a deep, calming breath and gave his daughter a nod. Thanks for reminding me. We should check on Fumiko-chan before I head there, though. And so, he did. Unfortunately, she was still in that dress, and Shaltir had apparently interpreted his orders as bring her to my bed, which didn't help in the fucking slightest. But, he was able to contain himself, for now. She looks so peaceful. Tayuya commented idly. She ain't like that at all when awake. That fight took a lot out of the both of us, Naruto told her. Your support magic was probably the only reason I didn't collapse when it was finally over. Technically, that wasn't entirely accurate. He still did collapse, but not out of exhaustion. Tayuya frowned in concern. Fair enough. Of course, Shaltir was still present, now garbed in her full battle gear with no less than 20 of her vampire brides keeping watch throughout the suite. Naruto turned to look at the vampiric loli with an odd expression. You know, when I told you to keep an eye on her, I didn't mean you needed to gear up and prepare for a siege. Shaltir blushed at that, averting her gaze sheepishly. I may have been a little overenthusiastic, she admitted. Naruto sighed. Shaltir, how many times do I need to say this? It wasn't your fault. Shaltir's gaze turned solemn. It feels like it was. She was my responsibility. Naruto sighed and pulled her into a one-armed hug. And what if Fumiko wasn't there? Would you have wanted to fight me to the death in her place? Truth be told, she said, after a moment of weighted silence, turning back to look at him with a saddened gaze, I probably would have preferred it if I was the one who was mind-controlled. Her gaze once again dipped down, to stare at her feet as she spoke softly. You were in so much pain when you were forced to fight her. Naruto shook his head. Silly girl, and do you think fighting you would have been any easier for me? Shaltir flinched, her cheeks turning bright pink in a sharp contrast to her otherwise deathly appearance. Why you mean that, Lord Kurama? Naruto nodded, completely missing what she meant. I do, he said, completely ignorant of how she was interpreting his words. Thank you, Shaltir muttered, thoroughly taken aback. She still felt like shit, though, knowing that the Supreme One liked her having ironically made it worse. She couldn't possibly be worthy of him. But then, her train of thought came to a merciful halt as Fumiko began to stir. The Pinkette's expression turned sour as she groaned, pushing herself up. She felt she'd been chewed up and spat out by a dragon, before getting trampled. Fumiko-chan! Tayuya shouted, rushing over to her and grabbing her big sister by her arms. Fumiko, how do you feel? You wah! Fumiko yelped, still in a daze. Tayuya, is that you? Tayuya released a sigh. She felt like a boulder had dropped from her shoulders. You're all right, she muttered, before her eyes turned vicious. Suddenly, she was shaking the Pinkette with enough force to rock the bed they were on. You stupid, irresponsible, overconfident brat. Do you have any idea how worried we were? Ta. Shake. You. Shake, shake, shake. Ya. The redhead's shaking eased up a bit. Please stop. You're making me dizzy. Oh, I'll make you dizzy all right. Tayuya muttered to herself darkly before shuddering. With a cry, she crashed into Fumiko, hugging the life out of her, or trying. Thankfully, Tayuya's strength was practically non-existent, especially in comparison to Fumiko's. Don't ever worry me so much again, you fucking idiot. Fumiko grinned, raising her arms and hugging her baby sister in return. No promises. For that remark, she received a smack over the head. Ow. Now, Naruto joked, I only have so much gold. I'd appreciate if you didn't kill your sister, Tayuya-chan. Shut up, Tayuya muttered, holding back a sniffle, burying her face in her big sister's stomach. Naruto only chuckled at that, sitting on the bed and ruffling the redhead's hair. Then, he turned to address his other daughter. Fumiko-chan, he said. Can you tell me how much you remember? The Pinkette tilted her head, bringing her hand up and running it through her baby sister's hair. Not really, she admitted with a shrug, it's all very fuzzy. I know there was some nasty spell headed for Shaltir, and that I punted her out of the way. The rest is like a dream, you know? I remember playing with you for a bit. Playing? Naruto mentally repeated to himself, blanching at what that might imply. It took everything he had and more to simply stay alive. And then it all just kinda went dark. I see. After a moment, Naruto took a deep breath. That dress Tayuya-chan's wearing, he explained, is a world-class item. It has the ability to take control of someone, but Shaltir apparently killed its user before it could take full effect. And, well, I couldn't snap you out of it. I see, Fumiko muttered. The tone her papa used was so sad. I'm sorry for being so reckless. It's fine, he sighed. Like I already told Shaltir numerous times, he stressed, throwing a glance at said vampire, there wasn't anything you could have done. But, now that we have an idea of what's out there, I'm taking measures to ensure that doesn't happen again. A few days later, while Cardinal Raymond contemplated the information they presented to him, Captain Zulfaz Azrael was making a beeline for his quarters and hiding a limp. He was tired. He was beaten. His scripture was now 6 seats smaller. Though the lot of them usually did solo work anyway, the Black Scripture still worked together quite well when they were sent out on joint missions. But for all 12 of them to have been so handily beaten by those two, despite having 1,000 men and Lady Care on their side as well. And, just to add insult to injury, they'd lost countless sacred treasures of the 6 great gods in the process, including the legendary downfall of castle and country. It was inconceivable. It was unforgivable. It was humbling. It made him realize that there truly is always a bigger fish. And at this point, all he wanted now was to close his eyes and take a long rest. 6. Unfortunately, though, that would have to wait. Zulfaz frowned as he saw a girl in a beige sweater playing with a 600-year-old relic of those same gods. The girl in question looked incredibly young, possibly in her early teens, but in truth, she was older than Lady Cara Boone of her questionable lineage. She sported mismatched eyes, one black and one white, her hair sported the same 2 colors and her attire matched the theme as well. Donning black leggings, mismatched boots, and a pleated skirt to go with that sweater, the girl leaned against the wall behind her with nary a care in the world. A massive war scythe was propped up right next to her as she fiddled with the relic, a Rubik's Cube, if memory served. The girl was Zeshi Zetsumi, the most powerful being currently alive within the slain theocracy. I hadn't expected you back so soon, she commented nonchalantly. I take it your mission was a failure? Zulfa sighed and plastered on a smile to humor her. Yes. Yes, it was. A sound one, at that. The girl perked up at that. I see, that's a first. She returned her attention to the Rubik's Cube. She would get 3 sides this time, damn it. She was bound and determined. Would your opponent happen to have been a male, by chance? This Ain's old gown character, perhaps? It wasn't, he told her. The ones we were sent to take on were some kind of demon and a vampire, both female. Oh, that's a pity. Zeshi sighed. Between me and them, who would you sat is stronger? I can't say I'm able to make that comparison, he answered, truthfully. You never fought me with the intent to kill. You sure of that? A smirk tugging at the corner of her lips as she leered at him. He sighed. Zeshi, don't play these games with me. Please? Not now. The girl pouted. Spoil sport. She muttered with a sigh. Well, if nothing else, I can look forward to seeing if they are strong for myself if they prove to be too much of an issue. The man's shoulders sagged. That's great. Hope you have fun, he grouched out. Now, if you'll excuse me, there's a bed in my quarters that I have an overdue appointment with. By your leave. He bowed and turned to leave. Oh, one more thing, Zeshi chirped. Have you heard any news of this Ain's character? I haven't. Such a pity. With that out of the way and not another word shared between them, Zulfas was on his merry way to bed. I wonder. Zeshi thought, grinning maniacally as she placed a hand upon her empty womb. Will you be the one? The Swords of Darkness were walking down a familiar road, the next day, their spirits high after having finished another quest. That was surprisingly easy, all things considered, Ninya commented. Didn't expect there to be so many of them though. Such is life in our line of work, Peter chuckled. It was a pretty standard monster hunt, the team having been sent to take out a nest of feral griffins. There were about 7 of the little fuckers, thankfully very young, only a few weeks old. Mama, however, was the hard part as one would assume. They had to lure her out and surprise her. After dealing enough damage and shooting her in the wings, all they needed to do was keep kiting her around, repeatedly pissing her off, until the beast tired out, and when she did, they dogpiled her. Dine of course cast Earthbind on her while Ninya and Luckrut peppered her from the sides and Peter attacked her head-on with the druid's support. Karn village isn't too far from here. Dine commented, seeing a nearby fork in the road. Should we go check on little Kushina and Regina? Peter rubbed his chin. It's been a while, hasn't it? Ninya smiled, looking up at the clouds. Yeah, it has. Peter nodded. Yeah, we probably should go check on them. It already feels like they are a part of the team, to be honest. To be separated from her for so long. Luckrut moped. The ranger leaving his party both amused and exasperated. Dine patted him on his back. We'll see her again soon, he assured. Luckrut nodded solemnly. You're the only one who understands me, aren't you, Dine? The druid in question had to force himself to keep a straight face, it was so hard not to laugh. Indeed. So then. Peter turned around, looking at his teammates as they all stopped at the road fork. You guys up for that? I'd like to. Ninya admitted. She liked the company, and missed the cheerful additions. Peter nodded, turning his gaze to Dine. How about you, big guy? I'm fine with either. he replied, before rubbing his chin. Checking on them wouldn't hurt, though. So, it's unanimous, then, Peter said, not even bothering to ask the ranger. He knew Luckrut was sincere, if a bit overdramatic. Sometime later, Naruto sat upon the throne of kings for the first time in what felt like ages. Albedo stood beside him as usual, ever at the ready to do his bidding with a smile on her face. Soon enough, the floor guardians entered the throne room one by one, his daughters also joined them. They had one extra being in attendance, however, gaining quite a few odd looks as Igusa stepped on in, before standing at attention. Of course, Fumiko was still in that thrice-damned dress, as her armor would take some time to repair. The beaded necklace she now donned caused many presents to perk up as she passed by, but no one commented. The little trinket sported 8 red, fang-shaped beads with many a black pearl in between. It was deceptively simplistic in its design, but all present knew the instant they saw it that this thing was powerful. She wasn't the only one with something new on her person. Everyone of course noticed Tayuya's new dress, but that wasn't the extent of it either. To be specific, Aura now donned a large scroll, hanging from her waist, while Mare sported a pair of mismatched gauntlets. One was black, the other white, and they both sported an impressive, intricate design. All 3 items sported an aura just as terrifying as that of the necklace, every last one of them as powerful as Albedo's scepter. Once Fumiko and Tayuya took their positions at either side of the throne and the guardians kneeled before the Supreme One, Naruto got the ball rolling. Now, I'm sure rumors of what happened have spread, he started, grinning a little when he saw some of the guardians trying to appear innocent. That being said, I'm pleased to inform you that Fumiko is back to normal, though her gear is still being repaired, last I heard. Embrace of Lilitu has nearly been restored, Main Führer, Pandora's actor declared flamboyantly, taking that as his cue to report the situation. Princess Fumiko's rings and amulet have been cleaned up as well. Thunderclap of the Demon King, meanwhile, only needed minor repairs and is ready to be wielded once more in your glorious name. Beside Naruto, Fumiko excitedly pumped her fist. Sweet. Everyone else, meanwhile, just stared at the doppelganger oddly, but again, they said nothing. Duly noted, Naruto chirped, taking in their confused expressions. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Pandora's actor, area guardian of the treasury and the sole creation of Momonga Senpai. The being in question stood up and bowed dramatically to the others, before taking a knee once more. With that out of the way, the Yuko continued where he left off. Now, then, as I'm sure you'd all assume, I am not about to let this slide. His tone suddenly grew far more menacing as he continued. This slain theocracy has picked a fight with the wrong fucker and I fully intend to make them suffer for it. Albedo perked up at that. So, does that mean we'll be expediting your master plan? Naruto blinked. Master plan? The succubus nodded eagerly. The one you mentioned that one time. Ha! Naruto cleared his throat. Not wanting to sound like an idiot, he gestured for her to continue. Right, to make sure everyone's on the same page, please, do explain what you mean to the others. Fumiko and Tayuya, meanwhile, immediately noticed something off about that response, though it was hard to tell what. As you wish, my lord, Albedo said, before stepping forth to address the other guardians. As I'm sure you've all noticed, Lord Kurama has been establishing relationships with a nearby village. He has also taken to infiltrating the Humans Adventurers Guild to gather information on who in this world might pose a threat to Nazarick. And he's begun to influence a number of their champions, these adventurers, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, yes, Naruto said with a nod. Albedo nodded back and readdressed the others. He has also put a rather high-ranking member of the kingdom's military in his debt, and I can only assume that he intends to insert this Enri Amat, a girl from Karn village who has shown feelings for him, into a position of power. Wait, what? Furthermore, he went out of his way to save this fortress city of Irantal, putting them in the debt of his alter ego, Kushina Uzumaki. One can only assume that he intends to use this leverage to bring them into our fold as well to secure our western borders in preparation for his master plan, the complete and utter domination of this new world. What? What the fuck? Naruto cleared his throat and composed himself when she was finished. Unfortunately, a lot of people there seemed very interested in that idea. 7. Very good, Albedo, he finally said, averting his gaze. You remembered. How could I forget, my love? From that one time. Yes, Lord, she replied with a bow. Naruto pursed his lips and tried again. That one time. That very one. What time are you talking about? Naruto cleared his throat again. I commend you for it. He could work with this. In fact, it might be a good thing. If nothing else, it'd give his more sinister guardians something to do that didn't involve raiding nearby villages for playthings Karn village especially. It could also make it easier to locate any players out there if they existed. I can't think of anything you missed, either, he added, plastering on a smile and ignoring his inner, darker self laughing his ass off. Good job, Albedo. The succubus beamed at his praise. Fumiko and Tayuya, meanwhile, frowned in confusion. Once again, they noticed something amiss, but neither of them commented on it. That being said, I'd like to explain the finer details of that plan so we don't have any misunderstandings, he began. It was the slain theocracy who fucked with me with us first. They're the ones who made me hurt my daughter. Naruto's tone turned immensely dark. I want them gone. He took a deep, calming breath and continued. But, if you don't watch your ass while invading another country, some cheeky, little shit will try and stick his dick in it, and I don't swing that way. That said, making sure the kingdom and the empire don't attack us will be our first order of business. He grumbled. Truly, Naruto didn't wish to bother himself with the other nations, not anymore. What he did want, was to march down to the theocracy and reenact Genghis fucking Khan. My lord. If I may. Demiurge said, stepping forth. Glancing at the demon, Naruto gestured for him to continue. I assume that we are to try subjugating the undead of the Katsa plane? Yes, actually, Naruto nodded. That was a wonderful idea, now that he mentioned it. I've heard a few things about them. The Katsa plane is known for the self-replenishing undead in its ruins. I'm pretty sure the overlords of Ashurbanipal would be pretty useful in that task, which would secure our eastern border and give us more expendables. He then hummed thoughtfully. But, we also have to deal with the Great Forest, now that I think about it. I assume you mean the lizardmen tribes to the north? Aura asked. Mare and I had just found them before we were called back, but they seem to be on par with the humans of this world. That sounds promising. Naruto replied thoughtfully. I was just about to ask if you found any settlements in there, actually. We need to make sure they don't try anything. I'm thinking that should be our first priority if they're closer. Once we're done with that, we'll move on with my plans for Karn Village and Irantal. As Albedo pointed out, they are my first attempts at a peaceful takeover. Peaceful takeover, milord? Demiurge asked, looking confused. The concept was quite foreign to him, so he needed more information if he was going to be of proper use. Naruto tapped his chin as he thought long and hard about his response. No empire lasts long when it relies on fear alone, he said. This may come as a surprise to some of you, but I was born a human, so I know how dangerous they can be from experience, especially in large groups. To say that they were surprised would have been a gross understatement. Literally no one present was expecting that revelation, even his daughters could have sworn he was born a kitsune. I'm also intimately familiar with how they function, he added. That said, it's much easier to rule them through the carrot and the stick. I think it's called punishing unwanted behavior while rewarding them for doing what you want them to, basically. My lord, your wisdom truly is beyond us, Demiurge said earnestly, bowing to Naruto. You're giving me too much credit, the Yuko said with a sheepish chuckle. I have my strengths and weaknesses like everyone else. You're far too modest, my lord, Demiurge claimed, pushing his glasses up his nose with a smirk. Maybe I am, Naruto chuckled again, now feeling a bit sheepish. But, I know my limits. One of the things I'm actually really bad at is planning ahead. More of a think on my feet kinda guy. Taking a deep breath, he then addressed Demiurge directly. That being said, I'm in need of a military strategist. After that fiasco with the theocracy, I'm gonna be revising my plans and I want you to help me with that. I'm flattered, my lord. I can only endeavor to serve you to the full extent of my capabilities. The Yuko's smile widened at that and then he turned to address Albedo. I'm also not as good as you are at being an administrator, Naruto said. I may have been the leader of Ainzel Gown at one point, but what I'm planning to do is on a completely different scale. I'm going to need your help in earnest. The succubus blushed heavily at that. As you wish, my love, I will do my absolute best to live up to your expectations. Naruto smiled again and nodded, before addressing the elven twins. Aura, Mare, you are to keep gathering information on those tribes. Those items will make sure that another incident like Fumiko's won't happen, so you've got nothing to worry about so long as you keep them equipped. Of course, me lord, Aura replied with a bow of her head. I'll do my best, Lord Kurama, Mare chimed in. Naruto smiled again and turned to Tayuya. You're going back to Karn village to keep an eye on them, he said. Enri and Nimue especially. Those two have kinda grown on me, as I'm sure you noticed, and the blonde has potential. Of course, his darker side couldn't help but chime in at that. I still think the little one would make for a cute pet. Quiet, you. The red-haired Kijo nodded, unaware of his brief inner squabble. Got it, boss. Taking a deep breath, the Yuko addressed everyone else. That will be all for now, he said. Fumiko, you wait in my quarters until I get back, you still need to rest. Demiurge, I want you to stay. We will discuss my plans further and you'll help me refine them. Everyone else, back to your stations. 8. Do you understand your task better now? I do, and I live to serve you, my lord, Demiurge answered, bowing to his lord. Will that be all? Naruto thought it over before nodding, then, once he realized the still bowing demon couldn't see his head movement, replied with a cough to hide his embarrassment. Yes, Demiurge. You're dismissed. By your leave. Naruto watched him go, wondering if he should add something. Demiurge was smart, hell, he was probably among the most intelligent people in all of Nazarick, right on up there with Albedo, Tayuya, and Pandora's actor, but his imagination obviously ran as wildly as that of a certain succubus. And he'd already been blindsided by her assumptions, today. He didn't need this man adding fuel to that fire. Demiurge, he called out, his decision made. The literally devilish man stopped in his tracks, turning on a dime when addressed. He raised an eyebrow. Lord? Naruto leaned forward on the throne, lacing his fingers under his chin as he stared at Albert's creation. Try to avoid jumping to conclusions. Demiurge was taken back by his master's words. The two inhuman beings locked gazes, Naruto staring at the formerly artificial being sharply. The message was clear, not another word needed to be said. With a smile, the demon bowed again, holding his hands to the side like a theatrical performer. Your wish is my command. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfiction. Looking forward to having you on board again.